Victor Caruso's voice cut through the cathedral like a blade. "I will not marry this woman." 200 guests froze. Elena Moreau stood motionless in white silk, her father's desperate alliance crumbling with 4 words. The most feared crime lord in the underworld had just refused his bride at the altar, not in private negotiation, but before everyone who mattered. Elena's humiliation was absolute, her value destroyed. 6 months later, enemies would come for her blood, and the only man who could save her was the one who'd already broken her. This is a story of rejection, survival, and the dangerous line between protection and possession. If you're drawn to stories of power, redemption, and love forged in fire, stay until the end. Hit like and comment with your city so I can see how far this story reaches across the world. Rome. The cathedral had been built for moments like this. Vaulted ceilings rose toward heaven, stained glass casting crimson and gold across marble floors. Candles flickered in iron sconces along stone walls that had witnessed centuries of sacred vows. But there was nothing sacred about what was happening here today. This was business. This was survival. This was the currency of the underworld, alliances sealed in blood, or in this case, in marriage. Elena Moreau stood at the altar in a dress she hadn't chosen, before a man she'd never wanted. The gown was exquisite, ivory silk that moved like water, hand-stitched lace that had taken artisans months to complete, a cathedral train that stretched behind her like a river of light. Her dark hair had been swept into an elaborate updo, tiny diamonds catching the candlelight with every slight movement of her head. She looked like a bride from a fairy tale. She felt like an offering being led to slaughter. 200 guests filled the pews, soldiers, capos, underbosses, and the heads of families whose names carried weight in every shadow of the city. Men in tailored suits that cost more than most people earned in a year. Women dripping in jewels that had questionable origins. Everyone who mattered in the criminal underworld of New Orleans had come to witness this union, not because they cared about love, because this marriage was supposed to change everything. The Moreaus and the Carusos had been circling each other for decades. Sometimes allies, sometimes rivals, always dangerous. Elena's father, Anton Moreau, controlled the ports and the trade routes that made the city's black market pulse with life. Victor Caruso's family owned everything else that mattered: protection rackets, high-stakes gambling, enforcement that kept order when the law looked away. A marriage between their children would consolidate power like nothing else could. It would make them untouchable. That was the theory, anyway. Elena kept her eyes forward, her hands steady around the bouquet of white roses her mother had pressed into her palms an hour ago. She hadn't looked at Victor yet. Not since she'd entered the cathedral on her father's arm. Not since the music had swelled and the guests had risen. She'd kept her gaze locked on the priest, on the altar, on anything except the man waiting for her at the end of this performance. Because that's all this was. A performance. A transaction dressed up in tradition. She'd known that from the moment her father had told her about the arrangement 3 months ago. "This is how we survive, Elena," Anton had said, his voice carrying the weight of decisions made without her input. "Victor Caruso is the future of this city. An alliance with his family protects ours. You understand that, don't you?" She'd understood. Understanding and accepting were 2 different things. Now, standing at the altar with her future being decided by men who saw her as a chess piece, Elena felt the full weight of her powerlessness. 22 years old, and her life had already been mapped out without her consent. Daughter, bride. Symbol of an alliance she'd never asked for. She'd spent weeks trying to find a way out. There wasn't one. Her father's position was too precarious. Rivals were pushing at the edges of Moreau territory, testing boundaries, looking for weakness. The marriage to Victor would shore up those defenses, would send a message that the Moreaus had the backing of the most feared family in the South. So Elena had stopped fighting. She'd let the dressmakers measure her, let the wedding planners dictate every detail, let her mother fuss over flowers and seating arrangements as if any of it mattered. She'd learned to wear a mask. It was the most valuable skill anyone taught her: how to smile when you wanted to scream, how to nod when you wanted to run, how to stand perfectly still when everything inside you was breaking. The priest was speaking now, his voice echoing through the cathedral in practiced cadence. Latin phrases Elena didn't understand, blessings she didn't want. The ritual of it all felt suffocating. She forced herself to take a slow breath, to keep her shoulders back, to maintain the composure expected of Anton Moreau's daughter. And then Victor moved. It wasn't much, just a shift in his stance, a tension that suddenly radiated from him like heat. Elena's attention snapped to him involuntarily, her carefully maintained distance crumbling in an instant. Victor Caruso was 30 years old and looked like he'd been carved from stone and shadow. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair swept back from a face that could have been handsome if it weren't so cold. Sharp jaw, intense eyes the color of smoke, a mouth that never seemed to smile. He wore a black suit tailored to perfection, crisp white shirt, no tie. As if even at his own wedding, he refused to be completely bound by tradition. Everyone said he was brilliant, ruthless, a strategist who saw 10 moves ahead while his enemies were still planning their first. Everyone said he'd taken control of the Caruso Empire at 25 when his father had been killed, and had consolidated power so completely that no one dared challenge him. Everyone said he was dangerous. Elena had met him exactly 3 times before today, twice at formal dinners where they'd barely spoken, once in her father's study where the marriage contract had been discussed like a business merger. He'd been polite, distant, utterly unreadable. She had no idea what he thought of her, of this arrangement, of anything. Now he was looking at the priest with an expression she couldn't decipher. The priest continued, oblivious. If any person here has cause to object to this union, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. It was a formality. No one ever objected. Not at weddings like this, where the guest list was a who's who of organized crime and everyone understood the consequences of disruption. The silence stretched, and then Victor spoke. I object. The words fell like a guillotine blade. Elena's heart stopped. Around them 200 people went absolutely still. Even the candles seemed to freeze mid-flicker. The priest blinked. I'm sorry. Victor's voice was calm, clear, and completely certain. I will not marry this woman. The world tilted. Elena heard the words, but they didn't make sense. They couldn't make sense. This was the plan, the alliance, the future that had been decided months ago. Victor Caruso didn't get to just... Victor. Her father's voice cut through the shock, low and dangerous. Anton Moreau stood in the front pew, his face a mask of controlled fury. What are you doing? Victor turned to face him. There was no apology in his expression, no hesitation. I'm calling off this wedding. You can't. Anton took a step forward, and immediately 3 of Victor's men moved to intercept. They didn't touch him, didn't threaten, but the message was clear. This wasn't negotiable. Victor's gaze swept across the assembled guests. When he spoke again, his voice carried to every corner of the cathedral. This marriage was arranged without my full consent. I will not be bound by agreements I did not make. Elena felt like she was watching the scene from outside her body. This couldn't be happening. Not here, not now, not like this. Your father agreed to the terms, Anton said, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. We have a contract. My father is dead. Victor's tone didn't change. I honor many of his commitments, not this one. The words hung in the air like poison. Elena's mother gasped. Around them, whispers erupted, shocked, scandalized, eager. This was the kind of drama that would be discussed in every dark corner of the city for months. The Caruso heir, refusing his bride at the altar. The Moreau daughter, publicly humiliated before everyone who mattered. Anton's face had gone white. You're making a mistake. Perhaps. Victor's eyes were cold. But it's my mistake to make. This destroys the alliance. There are other alliances? You'll regret this. Possibly. Victor inclined his head slightly, a gesture that might have been respect in any other context. But I won't marry a woman I don't want simply because our families decided it was convenient. The final blow, Elena heard it, felt it land like a physical strike. I don't want her. Not, I don't want this arrangement. Not, I don't want to be forced. But I don't want her. The humiliation was complete. She stood frozen in her wedding dress, bouquet still clutched in trembling hands, while the man who was supposed to be her husband systematically dismantled everything in front of 200 witnesses. Every eye in the cathedral was on her now, pitying, curious, gleeful. She could feel their stares like brands on her skin. Rejected, unwanted, worthless. Victor turned to her then, and for just a moment, something flickered in his expression. Was it regret? Apology? She couldn't tell, and it didn't matter. Whatever he might feel privately, he'd made his choice publicly. I'm sorry, he said quietly, and the words were meant only for her. Elena lifted her chin. She wouldn't cry, not here, not in front of these people who were already dissecting her downfall like vultures over carrion. No, you're not, she said, and her voice came out steady, clear. But you will be. It wasn't a threat, it wasn't even anger. It was simply the truth, a prediction she couldn't explain but knew in her bones. Victor held her gaze for another heartbeat, then turned and walked down the aisle. His men fell into formation around him, a protective barrier that moved through the chaos like a blade through water. The cathedral doors opened, letting in harsh afternoon sunlight, and then he was gone. For a moment, no one moved. No. Then Anton exploded into motion, shouting orders to his lieutenants, damage control already forming in his mind. Elena's mother rushed to her side, hands fluttering uselessly, words of comfort that meant nothing. The guests erupted into conversation, shock, speculation, scandal. Elena stood at the altar in her beautiful dress and let it all wash over her. She'd been a pawn her entire life, moved across the board by her father, by family obligations, by the ruthless mathematics of underworld politics. She'd accepted it because she'd had no choice, because fighting was futile, because this was the only world she knew. But now? Now she'd been publicly rejected. Her value as a marriage prospect was destroyed. The alliance her father had counted on was ashes. She was no longer a useful piece in anyone's game, which meant Elena realized with a strange, cold clarity that she was finally free. It was the worst kind of freedom, bought with humiliation, sealed in shame. But it was hers. She let the bouquet fall from her hands, white roses scattered across marble, petals crushing underfoot as people rushed past. No one noticed. They were too busy trying to understand what had just happened, trying to calculate the fallout, trying to position themselves for whatever came next. Elena walked down the aisle alone. Not toward the doors Victor had exited through. She wouldn't follow him, wouldn't give anyone that satisfaction. Instead, she turned toward the side entrance, the one used by clergy and choir. Her train dragged behind her, heavy and cumbersome, but she didn't care. Let it tear. Let it stain. The dress was ruined anyway, like everything else. She passed her father without looking at him, past her mother's tearful face, past the whispers and the stares and the judgment. The side door led to a small courtyard, empty except for stone benches and flowering vines climbing ancient walls. The sounds from the cathedral were muffled here, distant. Elena sank onto a bench and finally let herself breathe. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline crash following disaster. She pressed them flat against her thighs, willing the tremors to stop. I will not marry this woman. The words echoed in her mind on repeat. She tried to find anger, tried to summon rage, but what she felt instead was something far more dangerous. Relief. She hadn't wanted this marriage, hadn't wanted Victor, hadn't wanted any of it. But she'd resigned herself to it because that was what good daughters did in families like hers. They sacrificed, they obeyed. They became whatever was necessary for survival. Victor had just freed her from that cage. He probably didn't mean to. The rejection had clearly been about control, his refusal to be dictated to, his assertion of power over his own life. Elena had just been collateral damage in his declaration of independence, but the result was the same. She was unmarried, unwanted, completely without value in the marriage market that had defined her worth since birth. It should have felt like the end of the world. Instead, it felt like the first breath after drowning. Elena. She looked up. Her father stood in the courtyard entrance, his face still tight with fury. Behind him, she could see several of his men, waiting. We're leaving, Anton said. Now. Elena stood slowly, smoothing down her dress out of habit. Where are we going? Home. The word was clipped. We have a lot to discuss. That was an understatement. The alliance was broken. Rival families would see this as weakness. Her father would have to scramble to shore up his position, to find new strategies, new partnerships. The rejection had political consequences far beyond Elena's personal humiliation. She followed him through the courtyard, through back corridors that bypassed the main cathedral. His men flanked them, alert for threats that might capitalize on this moment of vulnerability. They emerged into harsh sunlight where a line of black cars waited. Anton's hand on her elbow was firm as he guided her into the back of the lead vehicle, sliding in beside her. The door closed with a heavy thunk, sealing them in leather and tinted windows. The car pulled away from the cathedral, from the scene of her public destruction. Elena watched the building recede through the window, its beautiful architecture now forever tainted in her memory. Anton was silent beside her, which was somehow worse than if he'd been shouting. She could feel his rage radiating like heat, could see the tension in his jaw, the white-knuckle grip on his phone. Finally, he spoke. "This is a disaster." Elena didn't respond. What was there to say? "Victor Caruso just made an enemy of this entire family," Anton continued, his voice low and dangerous. "He humiliated us in front of everyone who matters. There will be consequences." "What kind of consequences?" Elena heard herself ask. Her father's smile was cold, the kind that remind him why alliances matter in this world, why you don't make enemies of the Moreaus. A chill ran down Elena's spine. "You're going to go to war over this?" "Not war. Not immediately." Anton's gaze was calculating. "But Victor will learn that actions have prices, that he can't just walk away from agreements without repercussions." Elena thought about Victor's calm face, his absolute certainty. He'd known exactly what he was doing when he'd called off that wedding. He'd calculated the risks and decided they were worth it, which meant he was either brilliant or suicidal, or possibly both. The car wound through city streets away from the French Quarter's tourist traps toward the Garden District where the Moreau estate sprawled across manicured grounds. Elena had lived there her entire life. A beautiful prison with tall iron gates and security that rivaled military installations. She'd hoped the marriage to Victor might offer some escape from that. Now she was headed right back. But something had shifted. Some fundamental understanding had changed in the space between standing at that altar and sitting in this car. Elena had spent 22 years learning to be invisible, to be quiet, to be whatever her father's world demanded. Maybe it was time to learn how to be something else. The thought scared her almost as much as it thrilled her. The Moreau estate was in chaos when they arrived. Staff rushed through hallways carrying phones, documents, whispered urgent conversations into Bluetooth earpieces. Anton's lieutenants had beaten them home, were already assembled in his study, faces grim. Elena's mother was nowhere to be seen, probably in her room, managing her own crisis with wine and prescriptions. Anton didn't spare Elena a glance as he strode toward his study. "Go to your room. Stay there until I send for you." She was being dismissed like a child, like a problem to be dealt with later. Elena climbed the curved staircase to the second floor, her train still dragging behind her. A maid appeared offering to help with the dress, but Elena waved her away. She needed a moment alone, needed to think. Her bedroom was exactly as she'd left it this morning, makeup scattered across the vanity, pre-wedding jitters manifested in discarded outfit choices strewn across her bed. Everything from before she'd known her life was about to implode in the most spectacular way possible. Elena crossed to her window, looked out over the estate grounds. From here she could see the security fence, the guards patrolling, the carefully maintained gardens that were as much about image as beauty. The Moreau family projected power, projected control. Today had shattered that image. Her father would have to rebuild, and he'd use whatever tools he had available, including her. The realization settled over Elena like a weight. She might have been rejected by Victor, but that didn't mean her father was done using her as a bargaining chip. There would be other alliances to forge, other families to court. Her humiliation might actually make her more valuable in some ways, a Moreau daughter available for the taking, proof of Anton's willingness to negotiate, to make deals. She'd just traded one arranged marriage for the possibility of many more, unless she found a way to change the game entirely. Elena turned from the window and began systematically removing the wedding dress. The tiny buttons down her back required help, but she managed through sheer determination, twisting and contorting until the gown pooled at her feet like a discarded skin. She stood in her undergarments, staring at the dress on the floor. Thousands of dollars of silk and lace, now worthless, a symbol of broken promises and shattered alliances. She kicked it aside and pulled on jeans and a sweater, simple clothes that felt like armor after the vulnerability of that gown. There was a knock at her door. "Come in," Elena called, expecting a maid or one of her mother's attempts at comfort. Instead, it was Marcus, one of her father's most trusted lieutenants. He was in his 40s, graying at the temples, with the kind of face that had seen too much violence to ever look completely at ease. "Your father wants to see you," Marcus said. "In his study. Now." Elena's stomach tightened, but she nodded. She'd known this was coming. She followed Marcus back downstairs, through corridors she'd walked 1,000 times. The estate was quieter now. The initial panic had settled into something more focused, more dangerous. Plans being made, strategies being formed. Anton's study was all dark wood and leather, walls lined with books he'd never read, and art he'd acquired for status rather than appreciation. He sat behind his massive desk, three of his top men arranged around him like chess pieces. He looked up when Elena entered. Sit. She took the chair across from him, kept her spine straight, her expression neutral. Anton studied her for a long moment. Do you understand what Victor Caruso did today? He called off our wedding, Elena said evenly. He declared war. Anton leaned forward, not with guns or bombs, but with humiliation. He made us look weak in front of every family that matters. That kind of disrespect can't stand. Elena said nothing. There was nothing to say. I've spent the last 3 hours on the phone, Anton continued, doing damage control, reinforcing old alliances, making new promises, reminding everyone that the Moreaus don't break easily. I'm sure you were very convincing. His eyes narrowed. Watch your tone. Elena bit back the response that wanted to surface. This wasn't the time for rebellion. Not yet. The question, Anton said, is what to do about you. There it was, the real reason she'd been summoned. You're still my daughter, he continued. Still valuable, though admittedly less so now. Victor's rejection will make other families hesitate. They'll wonder what's wrong with you, why the Caruso heir found you unacceptable. Each word was a calculated strike. Elena absorbed them without flinching. However, Anton's expression shifted slightly. There may be a way to turn this situation to our advantage. Elena waited. I've received calls, her father said. Interest from unexpected quarters. Apparently your availability has made you appealing to certain parties who wouldn't have approached while you were promised to the Carusos. Her stomach turned. You're already arranging another marriage. I'm exploring options. Anton's tone suggested this was perfectly reasonable. We need allies, Elena. Strong ones. Your marriage can still serve that purpose. Can I refuse? The question hung in the air. Anton's smile was thin. You're a Moreau. You know the answer to that. Elena held his gaze. She did know the answer. Had always known it. Daughters like her didn't get to refuse. They smiled, accepted, performed their roles. That was the price of being born into this world. But something had shifted today. Some fundamental understanding had changed. What if I said no anyway? Elena heard herself ask. The room went very still. Anton's lieutenants exchanged glances. Her father's expression darkened. Then you would learn what happens to family members who forget their place, Anton said softly, and the threat in his voice was unmistakable. You live in my house, under my protection, supported by my resources. That comes with obligations, Elena. You don't get to pick and choose which ones you fulfill. So I'm a prisoner. You're a daughter with responsibilities. The distinction seems minimal. Anton slammed his hand on the desk, making everyone in the room jump. Enough. You will do what is required of you when it is required of you. Is that clear? Elena could feel the walls closing in, could see her future stretching out before her, an endless series of arranged marriages, political alliances, her body and her life bartered away piece by piece, unless she found a way out. Crystal clear, she said quietly. Anton studied her for another moment, then dismissed her with a wave. Go. I'll send for you when I've made a decision about your future. Elena stood, turned toward the door. As she reached it, her father spoke again. Elena. She looked back. Victor Caruso made a mistake today, Anton said. A significant one. He'll regret rejecting you. I'll make certain of that. The promise in his voice was dark, dangerous. Elena nodded and left the study, Marcus closing the door behind her. She walked through the mansion in a daze, her mind racing. Her father was planning something, some kind of retaliation against Victor, some way to salvage pride from humiliation, and Elena would be right in the center of it, whether she wanted to be or not. She needed air. Elena slipped through a side entrance into the estate gardens. The afternoon was fading into evening, golden light painting everything in shades of amber and shadow. She followed familiar paths between carefully trimmed hedges, past fountains and statuary, toward the far corner where the gardens met the security fence. This was her favorite spot on the estate, a small gazebo surrounded by climbing roses, hidden from the main house. She'd spent countless hours here as a teenager, reading, thinking, dreaming of lives that would never be hers. She sank onto the gazebo bench and finally let herself feel everything she'd been holding back since the cathedral. Humiliation, anger, fear, and underneath it all, that strange, persistent relief. Elena pulled her knees to her chest, wrapped her arms around them. She'd been trained her entire life for one purpose: to be valuable, to be useful, to serve her family's interests through advantageous marriage. Victor had destroyed that in 4 words. I will not marry this woman. Part of her hated him for the public humiliation, but another part, the part she tried to keep hidden even from herself, was grateful. He'd freed her, even if he hadn't meant to. Now she just had to figure out what to do with that freedom before her father sold her to the next highest bidder. The sound of footsteps on gravel made her look up. Marcus appeared through the rose arbor, his expression serious. Miss Moreau, he said formally, your father asked me to inform you that you're confined to the estate until further notice, for your safety. Translation: she was under house arrest. Elena nodded. Understood. Marcus hesitated, then spoke quietly. What happened today? It wasn't your fault. The unexpected kindness nearly broke her composure. She managed a small smile. Thank you, Marcus. He nodded and left, returning to his duties. Elena stayed in the gazebo as darkness crept across the gardens, watching lights flicker on throughout the estate. Security measures activating. Guards changing shifts. The machinery of her father's empire continuing despite the day's chaos. Somewhere across the city, Victor Caruso was in his own fortress, living his own life, probably not thinking about the woman he'd rejected at all. Elena wondered if he understood what he'd started today, if he knew that her father was planning retaliation, if he cared. Probably not. Men like Victor didn't concern themselves with the collateral damage of their decisions. They moved through the world making choices, changing lives, leaving destruction in their wake. But Elena had learned something important today. She'd learned that she could stand at an altar in front of 200 people and not break when her world fell apart. She'd learned that humiliation, while painful, wasn't fatal. She'd learned that the cage she'd lived in her entire life had a door, and Victor had just kicked it open. What she did with that knowledge was up to her. Elena stood, smoothing down her jeans out of habit. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of roses and the distant sounds of the city. Somewhere out there, people were living normal lives, going to dinner, watching movies, making choices about their futures that actually belonged to them. She wanted that. Wanted it with an intensity that surprised her. But wanting wasn't enough. Not in this world. In this world, you had to fight for what you wanted. Had to be willing to pay the price. Elena walked back toward the mansion, her mind already working through possibilities. Her father thought he could marry her off like a commodity. Victor thought he could reject her without consequences. They both saw her as a pawn, a piece to be moved or discarded as convenient. They were both wrong. Elena Moreau was done being moved by other people's hands. It was time to make her own moves. And if the board shattered in the process? Well, maybe that was exactly what this game needed. The first 3 months after the cathedral passed in a blur of controlled exile, Elena's world shrank to the borders of the Moreau estate. Her father kept her isolated, claiming it was for her protection while he navigated the political fallout. In reality, she knew it was punishment, a reminder that defiance had consequences, that daughters who questioned their place needed to be reminded of their limitations. She spent her days in the library, reading everything she could find about the families that controlled the city's underworld. If she was going to survive in this world, she needed to understand it better than anyone expected her to. She memorized territories, alliances, rivalries. She learned which families were rising and which were falling, who owed debts and who collected them. Knowledge was the only weapon she had. Her mother drifted through the house like a ghost, medicated and distant. They'd never been close, but the wedding disaster had widened the gap between them into a chasm. Her mother saw Elena's rejection as a personal failure, proof that she'd raised a daughter who couldn't even hold a man's interest long enough to make it through a ceremony. Elena stopped trying to bridge that distance. Marcus checked on her sometimes, brief visits that never lasted long. He'd bring her news from the outside world, carefully edited, nothing too revealing, and she'd pretend not to notice how much he was leaving out. Your father's making progress, he told her one afternoon in late September, standing in the doorway of the library. New alliances. Stronger position than before. Without needing to marry me off? Elena asked, not looking up from her book. Marcus's silence was answer enough. She learned to read between the lines of these updates. Her father was rebuilding, yes, but the Moreau position was more fragile than it had been before Victor's rejection. Rival families were testing boundaries, pushing at the edges of Moreau territory. Nothing overt enough to call open war, but enough to signal that Anton's authority was being questioned. In this world, weakness was blood in the water. October brought the first real chill to the air, and with it, a shift in the atmosphere of the estate. Elena noticed it in the way the guards moved, the urgency of phone conversations that cut off when she entered rooms, the late-night meetings in her father's study that stretched until dawn. Something was happening. She cornered Marcus in the hallway one morning, blocking his path before he could disappear into another urgent task. "What's going on?" "Nothing you need to worry about." "Marcus?" She held his gaze. "I'm not a child. Tell me what's happening." He glanced around, making sure they were alone. When he spoke, his voice was low. "There's been movement. The Volkov family is pushing into the eastern docks. Your father's trying to negotiate, but they're not interested in talking." Elena's mind raced through what she'd learned about the Volkovs. Russian syndicate, relatively new to New Orleans, but aggressive in their expansion. They dealt primarily in arms trafficking and had a reputation for brutality that made even seasoned criminals nervous. "Why now?" she asked. "They see an opportunity." Marcus's expression was grim. "The Caruso alliance falling apart made your father look weak. The Volkovs are capitalizing on that perception." So Victor's rejection wasn't just personal humiliation. It had strategic consequences that were still unfolding months later. "Is it serious?" "It could be." Marcus moved past her, then paused. "Stay close to the house, Elena. Things are about to get complicated." That was the most honest thing he'd said to her in months. The tension ratcheted up over the next 2 weeks. Elena watched from her window as security doubled, then tripled. New faces appeared on the estate, mercenaries, she guessed, brought in to supplement her father's regular soldiers. The Moreau compound was transforming into a fortress. Her father barely acknowledged her existence during this time. He was consumed with strategy, with damage control, with whatever plan he was constructing to counter the Volkov threat. Elena should have felt relieved to be ignored. Instead, she felt the walls closing in. November arrived with unseasonable warmth, the kind of false summer that made everything feel slightly off balance. Elena was in the garden, one of the few places she was still permitted, when Marcus found her. His face was ashen. "You need to come inside. Now." The urgency in his voice sent ice through her veins. "What happened?" "The Volkovs hit one of our warehouses, killed 6 of our men." Marcus was already pulling her toward the house. "Your father's calling everyone in. We're going to full lockdown." Elena's heart hammered as they rushed through the garden. 6 men dead. This wasn't posturing anymore. This was war. They reached the house just as Anton's voice thundered through the foyer. "I want every entrance secured. No one gets in or out without my explicit authorization." The estate erupted into controlled chaos. Men ran through hallways carrying weapons, shouting coordinates and status reports. Elena caught glimpses of her father through the crowd, his face tight with fury, phone pressed to his ear, barking orders that would determine whether the Moreau family survived this escalation. Marcus steered her toward the stairs. "Go to your room. Lock the door. Don't come out until someone you trust comes to get you." "What about my mother?" "Already secured." He was scanning the hallway, watching for threats. "Go, Elena. Now!" She went. Her room felt like a cage as she locked the door behind her. Through the window, she could see guards taking positions around the perimeter, weapons visible now where before they'd been concealed. The pretense of normalcy was gone. This was a compound under siege. Elena paced, her mind racing through everything she knew about the Volkovs. They were ruthless, yes, but also strategic. This attack wasn't random. It was calculated to achieve something specific. The question was what? Hours crawled past. Elena heard shouting from downstairs, doors slamming, the occasional sound of vehicles arriving and departing. She considered sneaking down to gather information, but Marcus's warning kept her in place. Things were too unstable, too dangerous. Dusk was falling when she heard the explosion. It wasn't close, somewhere outside the estate walls, but it was loud enough to shake her windows. Elena ran to look out, saw a plume of smoke rising in the distance, illuminated by the setting sun. Her phone buzzed. A text from a number she didn't recognize. "The Volkovs aren't your only problem. Check the news." A friend. Elena's hands trembled as she pulled up news sites on her phone. It took 3 tries before she found what the message was referencing: a warehouse fire in the industrial district. 2 dead, several injured. The property was registered to a shell company, but dig deeper and the ownership traced back to the Moreau family. And according to the news reports, there was evidence of accelerants. Arson. But it was the next detail that made her blood run cold. Investigators had found something else in the warehouse ruins: drugs, specifically fentanyl, enough to supply every addict in the city for months. The Moreaus dealt in many illegal enterprises, but Anton had always drawn a hard line against drug trafficking. It was one of the few moral boundaries he maintained, born from losing a brother to addiction years before Elena was born, which meant someone had planted those drugs. And whoever it was wanted the world to think Anton Moreau had broken his own cardinal rule. Elena was still processing this when her door burst open. She spun, heart in her throat, but it was Marcus, breathless, urgent. "We need to move, now!" "What's happening?" "No time to explain." He grabbed her arm, pulled her into the hallway. "We have intelligence that the Volkovs are planning a direct assault on the estate. Your father's moving you to a safe house." "And my mother?" "Already gone." They were rushing down the stairs now, Marcus's hand on his weapon. "We have maybe 20 minutes before they hit us. Your father's staying to defend the compound, but he wants you safe." Elena's mind was spinning. "Marcus, the warehouse fire, the drugs, someone's setting us up." "I know." His voice was tight. "We'll deal with that later. Right now, we focus on keeping you alive." They reached the ground floor. The house was in organized chaos. Men moving into defensive positions, weapons being distributed, final preparations for a battle that everyone knew was coming. Elena caught a glimpse of her father through the open door of his study, surrounded by maps and monitors and the grim faces of his lieutenants. Anton looked up, saw her. For just a moment, something flickered in his expression. Concern? Fear? It was gone too quickly to identify. "Get her out," he called to Marcus. "Yes, sir." Marcus pulled her toward the garage where a black SUV waited, engine already running. 2 of Anton's most trusted soldiers were in the front seats. Marcus opened the back door, practically pushed Elena inside. "Where are we going?" she demanded. "Somewhere the Volkovs won't think to look." Marcus slid in beside her. "Buckle up. This is going to be rough." The SUV peeled out of the garage, tires screaming on pavement. They shot through the estate gates just as they were swinging closed behind them, armed guards watching their departure with grim faces. Elena looked back at the mansion, her prison for the past 3 months, the only home she'd ever known. Lights blazed from every window. Men moved like shadows across the grounds. It looked like a fortress preparing for war, because it was. The SUV raced through darkening streets, weaving through traffic with practiced precision. Elena gripped the door handle, trying to make sense of everything happening too fast. "Marcus," she said carefully, "who sent that text about the news?" He looked at her sharply. "What text?" She showed him her phone. Marcus's expression darkened as he read it. "You don't recognize the number?" "No." He turned to the driver. "We may be compromised. Someone new to contact her. Someone who wants her to know about the warehouse setup." "Could be a trap," the driver said. "Could be intel." Marcus was thinking fast. "Either way, we stick to the plan. Get her to the safe house. Wait for the all-clear from Anton." Elena's phone buzzed again. Another message from the same unknown number. "The safe house isn't safe. The Volkovs know about it. You need different protection." Her stomach dropped. "Marcus, I see it." He was already on his own phone calling someone. "This is Marcus. We might have a leak." "Yes, I'm serious. Someone's feeding information directly to—" The driver's shout cut him off. "Contact rear." Elena twisted to look through the back window. 2 black motorcycles were weaving through traffic behind them, gaining fast. The riders wore dark helmets, their faces invisible. "Volkovs?" Marcus asked. "Can't tell." The driver accelerated, swerving around a slow-moving sedan. "But they're definitely following us." Marcus barked orders into his phone while simultaneously checking his weapon. The soldier in the passenger seat was doing the same, calm and efficient despite the rising danger. The motorcycles were getting closer. Elena's phone buzzed a 3rd time. "Turn left at the next light. There's a parking garage. 3rd level. Someone will meet you, trust me." "Marcus," Elena said, her voice surprisingly steady, "whoever's texting me knows we're being followed. They're offering help." "Absolutely not." Marcus didn't even look at the message. We don't know who they are or what they want. We also don't know if your safe house is actually safe. Elena met his eyes. And those motorcycles are getting closer. As if to punctuate her point, one of the riders pulled alongside the SUV. The passenger seat soldier rolled down his window, weapon raised, but before he could fire, the motorcycle swerved away, only to be replaced by the second bike on the other side. They were being boxed in. "Decision time," the driver growled. "Next light's coming up." Marcus's jaw was tight. "We stick to the plan." "Your plan might get us killed," Elena said, "or delivered directly to the Volkovs. And your mystery texter might be leading us into an ambush. Then we're dead either way." Elena's voice cut through the tension. "But at least this option is unexpected." Marcus stared at her for a long moment. The light was getting closer. The motorcycles were flanking them now, close enough that Elena could see the guns holstered on the riders' backs. "Damn it," Marcus leaned forward. "Turn left. The parking garage." The driver didn't question the order. He yanked the wheel hard, the SUV skidding through the intersection with inches to spare. Horns blared. One of the motorcycles followed, but the second got cut off by a delivery truck and fell behind. The parking garage loomed ahead, a concrete monstrosity that serviced a shopping complex. The SUV shot inside, tires squealing on the ramp. They spiraled upward, level 1, level 2, level 3. The third level was nearly empty, a handful of cars scattered across the vast space, no sign of whoever was supposed to meet them. "This is a mistake," Marcus muttered, weapon drawn as he scanned the shadows. The remaining motorcycle roared into the level behind them. Its rider killed the engine, climbed off slowly, hands visible, no weapons drawn. The driver aimed through the window. "Don't move!" The rider reached up, removed the helmet. Elena's breath caught. It was a woman. Mid-30s, dark hair pulled back, face sharp with intelligence and something that looked like concern. She wore tactical gear under a leather jacket, moved with the confidence of someone trained for combat. "My name is Sofia Reyes," she called out. "I work for Victor Caruso. He sent me to bring Elena to him." The world tilted. "No," Marcus said flatly. "Absolutely not." Sofia kept her hands visible. "The Volkovs have a mole in the Moreau organization. They know about every safe house Anton arranged. Elena stays with you. She's dead within the hour. She comes with me. She has a chance." Victor rejected her, Marcus spat. Why the hell would he protect her now? Because the Volkovs aren't just targeting the Moreaus. Sofia's gaze locked on Elena. "They're targeting anyone the Carusos might have allied with. Killing you sends a message to Victor. He can't let that message be sent." Elena's mind was racing. Why would Victor care what message the Volkovs send? Because he's the one who's been blocking their expansion into the city. Sofia took a careful step forward. The Volkovs want him weak. Killing the woman he was supposed to marry? That makes him look like he can't protect his interests. It damages his reputation. "I'm not his interest," Elena said. "He made that very clear." Something flickered in Sofia's expression. "Things are more complicated than they appeared at the cathedral. But right now we don't have time for explanations. You need to decide. Come with me, or take your chances with a compromised safe house." Marcus stepped between them. "I take my orders from Anton Moreau, not from Victor Caruso." "Then call Anton." Sofia's voice was steady. "Ask him what he wants, but do it fast, because the Volkovs are 3 minutes behind me, and when they get here, this conversation ends badly for everyone." Marcus's phone was already in his hand, dialing. It rang once, twice, 3 times. No answer. He tried again, same result. "The estate's under attack," Sofia said quietly. "Anton's probably too busy defending his home to answer his phone. Which means you need to make a command decision, Marcus. And you need to make it now." Elena could see the calculation in Marcus's face, weighing loyalties, risks, consequences. He'd been Anton's man for 20 years. But he'd also been tasked with keeping Elena safe, and right now, that task was rapidly becoming impossible. "If I hand her over, and this is a trick," Marcus said slowly, "I'll hunt you down, both you and Victor. I'll burn the Caruso Empire to ash, do you understand?" Sofia nodded. "Completely. But it's not a trick. Victor wants Elena safe. I have orders to bring her to him unharmed, and that's exactly what I intend to do." Elena found her voice. "Don't I get a say in this?" Both of them looked at her. "You want to go with her?" Marcus asked. Did she? Elena tried to think clearly through the adrenaline and fear. Victor had humiliated her, rejected her publicly, destroyed her value in a single declaration. She should hate him, should refuse to accept anything from him, especially protection. But Sophia was right about one thing. Staying with Marcus meant relying on a plan that had already been compromised, and her mystery texter, whoever they were, had been accurate about everything so far. "I want to survive," Elena said. "If Victor can offer that, then yes. I'll go with her." Marcus's expression was pained. "Elena, call my father when you can," she interrupted. "Tell him I'm safe. Tell him—" She paused. What message did she want to send? "Tell him I'm making my own decisions now." Before Marcus could respond, the sound of engines echoed up from the lower levels. Multiple vehicles, moving fast. "That's our cue," Sophia said. She threw a second helmet to Elena. "We need to move. Now." Elena caught the helmet, looked back at Marcus one last time. "Thank you for everything." He nodded, already turning to his men, preparing for the fight that was coming. "Go. I'll hold them as long as I can." Elena climbed onto the motorcycle behind Sophia, pulled on the helmet with shaking hands. Sophia started the engine, and the vibration thrummed through Elena's entire body. "Hold on tight," Sophia called back. "And whatever happens, don't let go." The motorcycle shot forward. Elena wrapped her arms around Sophia's waist, holding on for dear life as they raced toward the opposite ramp, the one leading down. Behind them, she heard the first sounds of confrontation, shouting, the sharp crack of gunfire. Marcus, buying them time. The motorcycle descended in a tight spiral, Sophia navigating with precision that spoke of extensive training. They burst out of the garage at ground level, merged into traffic, and disappeared into the flow of the city before the Volkovs could regroup. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. This was insane. She was fleeing from her father's protection into the hands of the man who'd rejected her, trusting a stranger, making decisions that would have consequences she couldn't predict. But for the first time in her life, they were her decisions. Sophia navigated through increasingly quiet streets, heading away from the commercial districts toward the river. The Caruso estate was on the far side of the city, neutral ground between Moreau and Volkov territories, a fortress as formidable as the one Elena had just fled. "How did you know?" Elena shouted over the engine noise. "About the safe house being compromised?" "Victor has people everywhere," Sophia called back, "including in the Volkov organization. We knew about their plan to hit the Moreau estate, knew they'd force Anton to move you. We've been tracking you since you left the compound." "Those texts, that was you?" "Someone who works for me. We needed you to make the choice to come with us. Kidnapping you would have started a war Victor doesn't want." They crossed the river on a bridge that sparkled with lights, the water below reflecting the city's glow. On the far side, the streets changed character. Older buildings, quieter neighborhoods, the kind of wealth that didn't need to announce itself. Sophia turned down a tree-lined avenue, slowed as they approached iron gates set into stone walls. Security cameras tracked their approach. The gates swung open smoothly. The Caruso estate sprawled before them, a mansion that made the Moreau compound look restrained by comparison. Greek Revival architecture, white columns, manicured grounds that could have been transplanted from an antebellum plantation, beauty and menace in equal measure. Sophia parked the motorcycle near the front entrance. Elena climbed off, her legs shaky from adrenaline and the vibration of the ride. She removed the helmet, looked up at the mansion, and felt reality settle over her like a weight. She was here, on Victor Caruso's territory, about to face the man who destroyed her life 3 months ago. The front door opened. A man in an immaculate suit stepped out, older, distinguished, with the bearing of someone used to authority. "Miss Moreau, welcome. Mr. Caruso is waiting for you in his study." Elena's stomach tightened. "Of course he is." Sophia touched her arm gently. "He'll explain everything. Just listen." "I'm good at listening," Elena said. "It's the believing part I struggle with." She followed the suited man through a foyer that could have housed her entire bedroom suite. Marble floors, crystal chandelier, artwork that belonged in museums. The wealth on display was staggering, but it was the security that caught her attention. Cameras in every corner, reinforced doors, the subtle bulge of weapons under the jackets of men stationed throughout the house. This wasn't just a home. It was a fortress. They climbed a sweeping staircase, walked down a hallway lined with portraits of Caruso ancestors, stern faces watching from gilded frames. The suited man stopped at a heavy wooden door, knocked twice. "Come in," Victor's voice, unmistakable even through the wood. The door opened. Victor's study was all dark leather and rich wood, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, and a desk that looked like it weighed more than most cars. A fire burned in the fireplace despite the mild evening, casting dancing shadows across the room. Victor stood by the window, looking out over the grounds. He wore dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, the most casual Elena had ever seen him. He turned as she entered, and for a moment they just looked at each other across the space. He looked tired. That was Elena's first thought. The man who'd stood so confidently at the altar, who'd rejected her with such certainty, looked like he hadn't slept properly in weeks. "Elena." He gestured to a chair near the fireplace. "Please, sit." "I'll stand." Her voice came out colder than she'd intended. "This won't take long. I just want to understand why I'm here." Victor's jaw tightened slightly. "You're here because the Volkovs want you dead, and I couldn't let that happen." "Couldn't? Or wouldn't?" "Both." He moved toward the desk, poured amber liquid from a crystal decanter into 2 glasses. He offered one to Elena. She didn't take it. He set it on the table beside the chair anyway. "I know you have questions." "I have more than questions," Elena said. "I have a right to understand why the man who publicly humiliated me is now playing protector." "I know how it looked at the cathedral." Victor took a drink from his own glass. "But things weren't what they seemed." "Then enlighten me." Elena crossed her arms. "Because from where I stood, you rejected me because you didn't want me. Your exact words, if I remember correctly." Victor winced, actually winced. "That's not why I stopped the wedding." "Then why?" The silence stretched between them. Elena could hear the fire crackling, the distant sounds of the estate, her own heartbeat loud in her ears. Finally, Victor spoke. "Because I'd received credible intelligence that morning. Someone was planning to kill you during the reception. The wedding was a trap, Elena. For both of us." The words hit like a physical blow. Elena sank into the chair she'd refused moments before. "What?" "There was a plot," Victor continued, his voice low and intense. "Multiple families working together. They wanted to eliminate both the Moreau and Caruso heirs in one strike. Make it look like a tragedy, an attack during our wedding that killed the bride and groom. 2 birds, 1 stone. Elena's mind raced. Who? The Volkovs were the primary movers, but they had help from families inside our own organizations, people we trusted. Victor's expression was dark. "I found out that morning. Had to make a split-second decision. If I went through with the wedding, you'd be dead by sunset. So would I." "So you called it off." "I made you unwanted." Victor's gaze held hers. "I made everyone in that room think I'd rejected you out of personal preference. Made you seem worthless to me. Because if you had no value as my wife, there was no reason to kill you." Elena tried to process this. "You humiliated me to save my life?" "I humiliated you to make you invisible." Victor moved closer. "It worked too. For 3 months you were off the radar. The Volkovs focused on other targets. I had time to identify the conspirators, eliminate the threats within my organization. Until now." "Until now," he agreed. "The situation's changed. The Volkovs are making their move against your father. They need leverage against me. You're that leverage, Elena. Rejected bride or not, you're still connected to both families. Killing you sends a message I can't ignore." Elena stood, paced to the window, looked out at the grounds lit by security lights. Her entire understanding of the past 3 months was rewriting itself. The rejection that had destroyed her reputation had actually been protection. The humiliation that had felt so personal had been strategic. "You could have told me," she said quietly. "After. You could have explained. I couldn't risk it." Victor's voice was closer now. She could feel him standing behind her, not touching but present. "Your father had leaks in his organization. Anything I told you might have gotten back to the wrong people. The only way to keep you safe was to make everyone, including you, believe the rejection was real." Elena turned to face him. They were close now, close enough that she could see the lines of stress around his eyes, the tension in his jaw. "How do I know you're telling the truth now?" "You don't." Victor's honesty was startling. "You have every reason not to trust me. I'm asking you to anyway." "Because the Volkovs are coming. Because the Volkovs are already here." Victor moved back to his desk, pulled up security footage on a monitor. "They hit your father's estate 20 minutes ago, full assault, Anton's holding them off, but it's only a matter of time. Elena's breath caught. Is he alive? Last I checked. Victor's expression was grim. But he can't win this fight. The Volkovs came prepared for war. Then help him. Elena heard the desperation in her own voice. You have resources, soldiers. Help him. I am helping him. Victor met her eyes. By protecting the one thing he cares about more than territory or pride, his daughter. The weight of that statement settled over her. He sent me away to keep me safe. He sent you into a trap. The safe house was compromised. If Sofia hadn't intercepted you, the Volkovs would have you right now. Elena sank back into the chair, her mind struggling to keep up. 3 months of anger, humiliation, confusion, all of it recontextualized in a matter of minutes. Victor hadn't rejected her out of cruelty. He'd rejected her out of necessity, but that didn't erase the consequences. What happens now? She asked. Now you stay here, under my protection, until this situation resolves. And if it doesn't resolve? If the Volkovs win? Victor's smile was cold. They won't. The confidence in his voice should have been reassuring. Instead, it sent a chill down her spine. This was the man people feared, the strategist who saw 10 moves ahead, the crime lord who'd taken control of an empire at 25 and held it through sheer force of will and intelligence. And Elena was now in his care, whether she wanted to be or not. I want to talk to my father, she said. I need to know he's okay. Victor nodded, picked up his phone, made a call. The conversation was brief, cryptic. When he hung up, his expression was carefully neutral. He's alive. Injured but stable. The Volkovs have pulled back for now, but they'll regroup and hit again. I should be there. You should be here. Victor's tone left no room for argument. That estate is a war zone. You'd be a liability, not a help. The words stung, but they were true. Elena had no training, no skills that would be useful in combat. She'd just be another person Anton would have to protect while fighting for his life. How long? She asked. Until it's safe? Days. Maybe weeks. Victor leaned against his desk. The Volkovs made their move too early. They're overextended. I'm already working with other families to cut off their supply lines, isolate them politically. This ends with them broken or dead, but it takes time. Elena looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time since entering the study. The Victor who'd stood at the altar had been cold, unreachable. This Victor was still guarded, but there was something else underneath. Concern. Determination. And unless she was very much mistaken, guilt. You feel responsible, she said, for all of this. I am responsible. Victor's voice was flat. I made the call to stop the wedding. I set this chain of events in motion. Your humiliation, your father's weakened position, the Volkovs seeing an opportunity, all of it traces back to my decision. You said it was to save our lives. It was. Doesn't mean there weren't consequences. Doesn't mean I don't carry them. He met her eyes. I'm sorry, Elena. For the cathedral. For the months you spent thinking I rejected you because you weren't good enough. You deserve better than what I did to you. The apology hung in the air between them. Elena didn't know what to do with it. Accepting it felt like letting him off the hook too easily. Rejecting it felt childish. I don't forgive you, she said finally. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I understand why you did it. Victor nodded slowly. That's fair. A knock at the door interrupted the moment. Sofia entered, her expression urgent. We have movement. 3 Volkov vehicles approaching from the east. They're not trying to hide it. Victor was already moving toward a weapons cabinet. How many men? At least 15, maybe more. Sofia's hand was on her own weapon. They're coming hard. Elena stood, her heart racing. They followed us here. Or they were always planning to hit us tonight. Victor pulled out a handgun, checked the magazine with practiced efficiency. Elena, Sofia's going to take you to the safe room. It's reinforced, untraceable. You'll be protected no matter what happens up here. No. The word came out before Elena could stop it. Both Victor and Sofia looked at her. No? Victor's voice was dangerous. This isn't a negotiation, Elena. You're going to the safe room. Now. You said I was here under your protection. Fine. But I'm not hiding while people fight and die over me. Elena's voice was steady despite her fear. I've spent my entire life being moved around like a chess piece. That ends tonight. I stay, and I help however I can. You have no training. Then give me something to do that doesn't require training. She stepped closer to him. Communication. Monitoring security feeds, something, but I don't hide. Not anymore. Victor stared at her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, his mouth curved into something that might have been a smile. You're tougher than I gave you credit for. You're not the first person to underestimate me, Elena said. Probably won't be the last. Fine. Victor turned to Sophia. Put her in the command center. She can monitor feeds, relay information. But if they breach the perimeter, you get her to the safe room. No arguments. Sophia nodded. Understood. The estate erupted into controlled chaos as Victor's soldiers moved into defensive positions. Elena followed Sophia down to a room in the basement, a sophisticated command center with multiple monitors showing every angle of the estate, communication equipment, and enough technology to coordinate a small army. Watch the feeds, Sophia instructed, pressing a radio into Elena's hand. Anything unusual? Anything that doesn't look right, you call it in immediately. Victor's channel is 3, mine is 5. Can you do this? Elena looked at the monitors, at the world of violence and strategy unfolding in real time. Yes. Sophia squeezed her shoulder once, then was gone, heading back upstairs to join the fight. Elena was alone in the command center, watching the Volkov vehicles approach on the screens. 15 men, Sophia had said, maybe more. Coming to finish what they'd started when they'd hit the Moreau estate. Her phone buzzed, a text from the same unknown number that had helped her escape. You're exactly where you need to be. Trust Victor. He's one of the good ones, even if he doesn't always show it. Elena stared at the message. Then, slowly, she typed back, Who are you? The response came immediately. Someone who wants you to survive. Now focus. The next few hours determine everything. On the monitors, the Volkov vehicles stopped at the estate gates. Men poured out, armed and ready. The war had come to Victor's doorstep, and Elena, for better or worse, was right in the middle of it. The monitors showed Volkov soldiers spreading out along the perimeter like a dark stain. Elena counted 19 armed men, all moving with military precision. This wasn't a hasty attack. This was a coordinated assault by people who knew exactly what they were doing. Her radio crackled. Victor's voice, calm despite the circumstances. Command, status report. Elena pressed the transmit button, surprised by how steady her own voice sounded. 19 hostiles visible. They're positioning around the east and south gates. No movement on the north or west perimeters yet. Copy that. Keep watching the north side. They might be trying to flank. A pause. You doing okay down there? The question caught her off guard. In the middle of a crisis, he was checking on her. I'm fine. Just tell me what you need. Eyes on those screens. You're our early warning system. Then he was gone, directing his forces to counter the Volkov positioning. Elena forced herself to focus on the monitors. The command center was impressive. 12 screens showing different angles, thermal imaging, motion sensors, even satellite feeds. Victor had built something that rivaled government security installations. She watched the Volkov soldiers move into position. They were careful, professional, checking corners and maintaining formation. Whoever had trained them knew their business. On screen 6, she caught movement near the north wall, just a shadow, but enough to trigger her instinct. Channel 3, she spoke into the radio. Victor, I've got possible movement north wall, section B. Can't confirm yet, but something's there. Switching camera to thermal, Sophia's voice this time. A moment later, one of Elena's screens shifted to heat signatures. 3 figures were visible, pressed against the wall, trying to stay hidden. Confirmed, Sophia said. Nice catch, Elena. Victor, they're trying the pincer move you predicted. Elena felt a strange rush of satisfaction. She'd helped, actually contributed something useful instead of just being a liability to protect. The next 20 minutes were a masterclass in defensive strategy. Victor coordinated his forces with precision, anticipating the Volkov's moves before they made them. His soldiers took positions that turned the attackers' advantages into vulnerabilities. Elena watched it unfold on the screens, calling out movements and positions, gradually understanding the chess game being played with lives instead of pieces. But the Volkovs weren't giving up. They're bringing something up, Elena reported, watching screen 4 where a vehicle she hadn't noticed before was rolling toward the main gate. Looks like, is that a battering ram? Victor's curse was creative. They're going to try to breach the gate directly. Sophia, get teams 2 and 3 to the main entrance. Suppress that vehicle before it reaches the gate. Gunfire erupted. Elena flinched at the sound echoing through the estate, even though she was safe in the basement. On the monitor, she watched Victor's soldiers engaging the vehicle, bullets sparking off reinforced metal. The Volkovs returned fire, and suddenly the screens were full of muzzle flashes and chaos. "They've got the vehicle armored," Sophia reported, her voice tight. "We're not stopping it." "Fall back to secondary positions," Victor ordered. "Let them breach the gate. We'll bottleneck them in the courtyard." Elena's breath caught. "You're letting them in?" "Sometimes the best defense is a controlled retreat." Victor's voice held grim satisfaction. "They want to come inside? We'll make them regret it." The battering ram hit the gate with a sound like thunder. Once, twice. On the third impact, the gate buckled. The Volkov soldiers poured through the gap, moving fast, weapons raised, and walked directly into a killing field. Victor's forces had positioned themselves in elevated locations around the courtyard, balconies, windows, rooftop positions. The Volkovs found themselves in a crossfire with nowhere to hide. The fight was brutal and brief. Within 90 seconds, half the attacking force was down, and the rest were scrambling for cover. Elena watched it all unfold on the monitors, her stomach churning. She'd read about violence, heard stories about the brutal realities of the underworld. But seeing it happen in real time, watching men fall and not get back up, was something else entirely. "Command, I need you to focus." Sophia's voice cut through her shock. "Check the perimeter feeds, all of them. This might be a diversion." Elena forced herself to tear her eyes away from the carnage in the courtyard. She systematically scanned each monitor, looking for anything out of place. North wall, clear. West gate, clear. South perimeter, clear. East side. She froze. On screen 9, which showed the service entrance on the far east side of the estate, a door was opening. Not the main door, a smaller access point that should have been locked and alarmed, and through it 3 figures were slipping inside. Not dressed like the soldiers in the courtyard. These wore estate staff uniforms. "Channel 5, Elena said urgently. "Sophia, we have a breach. East service entrance. 3 hostiles in staff uniforms. They're already inside." "What?" Sophia's shock was evident. "That entrance should be secured. How did they—" "Doesn't matter how," Victor cut in. "Where are they now?" Elena switched to interior cameras, tracking the 3 figures as they moved through the service corridors. They knew exactly where they were going, which meant they'd studied the estate layout, or had help from someone inside. The realization hit her like ice water. They have floor plans. They're heading toward— She traced their path forward, her mind racing through what she'd learned about the estate's layout. They're going for the main power junction. If they cut power, we lose all defensive advantages. "Sophia, take your team. Intercept them before they reach the junction." Victor's voice was steel. "Elena, guide them. You've got eyes we don't have down there." Elena's hands trembled as she tracked the infiltrators on the screens. "They're passing through the kitchen level now, heading east. There's a service stairwell at the end of the corridor. That's their most likely route down." "On it." Sophia was moving, her team visible on one of the interior cameras. "Keep me updated on their position." What followed was the most intense 5 minutes of Elena's life. She watched both groups on different screens, calling out positions, warning Sophia about corners and blind spots, her heart hammering every time the 2 groups got close. The infiltrators were fast, but Sophia's team was faster, cutting off their route to the power junction and forcing them into a storage area. The confrontation was swift and violent. Elena watched Sophia move like a dancer, precise and lethal. Within seconds, 2 of the infiltrators were down. The third tried to run, but one of Sophia's team caught him, drove him to the ground. "Hostile secured," Sophia reported, breathing hard. "Elena, that was good work. Really good." Elena slumped in her chair, adrenaline making her shake. She'd helped stop them, actually prevented something catastrophic from happening. But the victory was short-lived. On the courtyard cameras, the remaining Volkov soldiers were retreating, dragging their wounded with them. Victor's forces held their positions, not pursuing. The attack was over. Except it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a message. "They're pulling back," Elena reported. "Let them go." Victor's voice carried exhaustion. "Everyone, maintain positions for another hour. Make sure this isn't a feint." The estate settled into tense quiet. On the monitors, Elena watched Victor's soldiers check the fallen, secure the breached gate, begin the grim work of assessing damage. 7 Volkov soldiers were dead in the courtyard. 3 more captured inside. The rest had fled. But Victor's forces hadn't escaped unscathed. Elena counted at least 4 wounded being carried inside, and from the urgent radio chatter, one was critical. Her phone buzzed. Another text from the unknown number. The attack was a test. Victor passed. But the real move is coming. The Volkovs don't give up this easily. Elena stared at the message, her chest tight. Who was this person? How did they know so much? She typed back, "What real move? When?" The response took longer this time. "Can't say yet. Too many ears listening, but watch Victor carefully. Someone in his organization isn't what they seem. A traitor." That's how the infiltrators had known about the service entrance, had the floor plans, had bypassed security. Elena switched radio channels to Victor's frequency. "We need to talk, privately." There was a pause. "Give me 10 minutes. Stay in command." Those 10 minutes felt like hours. Elena watched the monitors, her mind racing through implications. If there was a mole in Victor's organization, that explained so much. The compromised safe house that had almost gotten her killed, the Volkovs' precise knowledge of estate defenses, maybe even the original plot to kill her at the wedding. Victor appeared on one of the interior cameras, making his way down to the command center. He looked exhausted, a cut on his cheek, his white shirt stained with blood, whether his own or someone else's. Elena couldn't tell. The door opened. Victor stepped inside, and Elena was struck by how different he looked from the composed crime lord who'd stood at that altar. This was a man who'd just fought for his life and won, but the victory had cost him. "You did well tonight," he said, moving to check the monitors himself. "Sophia told me. You probably saved several lives by catching those infiltrators." "I had help." Elena showed him her phone, the mysterious texts. "Someone's been feeding me information. Good information. They warned me about the safe house being compromised. They just told me this attack was a test." Victor's expression darkened as he read the messages. "You don't know who's sending these?" "No, but they've been right about everything so far." Elena met his eyes. "They also said you have a mole in your organization, someone who's not what they seem." The silence that followed was heavy with implications. "I know," Victor said finally. Elena blinked. "You know? Then why?" "Because I don't know who it is yet. And until I do, I can't make a move without tipping them off." He sank into one of the command center chairs, suddenly looking every one of his 30 years and more. "I've been hunting this leak for months. Someone high enough to have access to sensitive information, close enough to know my plans before I execute them." "The wedding," Elena said slowly. "That's why you really stopped it. Not just because of the plot to kill us, because you didn't know who to trust." "Partly." Victor rubbed his face, the exhaustion showing through. "The threat was real, but yes, I also knew I had a traitor close to me. Going through with the wedding meant exposing you to danger I couldn't predict or prevent. So I made you worthless to them. Made everyone think I didn't care. And it worked, until the Volkovs changed tactics. Until they got desperate enough to come after you anyway." Victor looked at her, something like regret in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Elena, for all of it. The humiliation was strategic, but that doesn't make it less damaging. Doesn't erase what I put you through." Elena studied him in the harsh fluorescent light of the command center. The powerful crime lord who'd rejected her so coldly at the altar was gone, replaced by a man who looked haunted by his choices. She could stay angry, could hold on to the hurt and humiliation, or she could accept that in this world, sometimes the cruelest choices were the ones made out of desperation. "My mystery contact said you're one of the good ones," she said quietly. "Are you?" Victor's laugh was bitter. "I've killed people, Elena. Ordered deaths, authorized torture, done things that would horrify you. Good is relative in our world." "That's not what I asked." He held her gaze. "I try to be better than my worst impulses. I try to minimize innocent casualties. I protect the people under my care, and I honor my word when I give it. Is that good enough?" "It's honest." Elena moved to sit in the chair beside him, both of them facing the monitors showing the estate slowly returning to defensive readiness. "What happens now?" "Now, I find my mole. I finish the Volkovs before they can regroup, and I make sure you survive this mess I created." Victor's jaw tightened. "Your father's still under siege. The Volkovs hit his estate hard. He's alive, but barely holding position." Elena's chest constricted. "I should call him." "You should, but be careful what you say. If he has leaks too, and he probably does, anything you tell him could get back to the wrong people." She pulled out her phone, dialed her father's number. It rang 6 times before he answered, and when he did, his voice was rough with pain and exhaustion. Elena. Dad, are you okay? Define okay. Anton's attempt at humor fell flat. I've been better. Where are you? Safe. With Victor Caruso. The silence on the other end spoke volumes. Dad, he told you then. About the wedding. Anton's voice was tight. I found out 3 days after. Wanted to tell you, but he made me promise to keep silent. Said it was the only way to keep you protected. Elena's world tilted again. You knew? This whole time? Not at first, but yes, I knew. Her father's shame was palpable even through the phone. And I let you suffer because Victor convinced me it was necessary. I'm sorry, Elena, for that and for so much else. Are you really okay? Elena redirected, not ready to unpack that revelation yet. We heard the Volkovs hit you hard. 3 of my best men are dead. 2 more won't make it through the night. I'm down to skeleton crew, and the Volkovs know it. Anton paused. But I'm alive. Thanks to Victor's warning, I was prepared enough to hold them off. Barely. What warning? He called me 2 hours before the attack, told me exactly when and how the Volkovs would hit. Gave me time to reinforce critical positions. Anton's voice carried grudging respect. He didn't have to do that. We're not allies. But he did it anyway. Elena looked at Victor, who was studiously watching the monitors, pretending not to listen, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the awareness of her gaze. I have to go, Anton said. But Elena, be careful. The Volkovs aren't done. And until this is over, you stay with Victor. He's the only one strong enough to protect you right now. I know. I love you. Never doubt that, even when I make terrible choices. The line went dead before Elena could respond. She lowered the phone slowly. You warned him. Victor still didn't look at her. It was the tactical thing to do. If the Volkovs eliminated Anton, they'd have clear path to Moreau territory. That destabilizes the entire city, which destabilizes my position. That's not why you did it. Now he looked at her. No? You did it because despite the politics and the strategy, you didn't want him to die, because you understood what that would do to me. Elena's voice softened. Thank you. Victor looked uncomfortable with the gratitude. Don't thank me yet. We're not out of this. The Volkovs just lost 19 men, including 3 we captured. They'll retaliate, and when they do, it'll be worse than tonight. What about the prisoners? Can you question them? Find out what they're planning? Already being done. Victor stood, moved back to the monitors. But these men are professionals. They won't break easily, if at all. We might get lucky, might get something useful, but I'm not counting on it. Sophia's voice crackled over the radio. Victor, we've got a situation. One of the prisoners is asking to speak to you, says he has information worth trading. Victor and Elena exchanged glances. On my way. He turned to Elena. Stay here. Keep monitoring. If anything changes, anything at all, you call me immediately. Wait, Elena stood. Let me come with you. Absolutely not. I might recognize something. Here's something that triggers a connection you'd miss. Elena could see him about to refuse again. Please. I'm tired of being locked away while decisions get made without me. I can help. Victor studied her for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he nodded. Stay behind me. Don't speak unless I ask you a direct question. And if I tell you to run, you run. Understood? Understood. They made their way through the estate to the lower level, a section Elena hadn't seen before. The basement here was utilitarian, all concrete and steel, clearly designed for purposes that didn't require aesthetic appeal. Security holding cells, she realized, places to keep people who needed to be controlled. The prisoner was in the farthest cell, separated from his companions. He was younger than Elena expected, maybe mid-20s, with a face that might have been handsome before it had been split open by someone's fist. He looked up as they approached, and Elena saw calculation in his eyes. Mr. Caruso. The prisoner's accent was thick, Eastern European. Thank you for seeing me. You have 60 seconds. Victor's voice could have frozen steel. Talk. I want deal, protection, reduced sentence, relocation. You're not in a position to negotiate. I am if I give you something valuable. The prisoner leaned forward. I know who your mole is. The air in the corridor went electric. Victor didn't react visibly, but Elena could feel the sudden intensity radiating from him. Keep talking. First, we agree on terms. First, you prove you actually know something worth negotiating for. Victor moved closer to the cell. Give me a name, give me proof. Then we talk deals. The prisoner smiled, blood on his teeth. The proof is standing next to you. Elena's breath caught. The prisoner's gaze fixed on her. Elena Moreau, the rejected bride, the woman everyone thought was worthless. His smile widened. Except she's not worthless at all, is she? She's the key to everything. The Volkovs know it. Your mole knows it. And now you're starting to understand it too. I said give me a name, Victor growled. The name won't help you. They're too well protected, too deeply embedded. The prisoner shifted his attention back to Victor. But I can tell you their plan. What they're really after. Why they want her so badly. Then tell me, after we have deal. Victor's hand moved so fast Elena barely saw it. One moment he was standing outside the cell. The next, his arm was through the bars, hand locked around the prisoner's throat, slamming him back against the wall. Here's the deal, Victor said, his voice deadly calm. You tell me what I want to know, or I let Sophia spend quality time with you. She's very creative when she's motivated. Your choice. The prisoner choked, eyes bulging. Victor released him, and he collapsed to the floor, gasping. The wedding, the prisoner wheezed, the plot to kill you both. It wasn't just about eliminating heirs. Then what was it about? Control. The prisoner looked up, and Elena saw genuine fear in his face now. The Volkovs don't just want territory, they want the city. All of it. Every family, every operation, everything. To do that, they need leverage over the two most powerful families, Moreau and Caruso. We already know this, Victor said impatiently, but you don't know about the alliance. The prisoner's smile returned, shakier this time. The Volkovs aren't working alone. They have partner, someone with resources, connections, legitimacy they lack, someone who benefits from chaos in the underworld. Elena felt cold seep into her bones. Who? The prisoner looked at her, and his expression was almost pitying. Someone you trust, someone who's been planning this for years, waiting for the right moment to make their move. A name, Victor demanded. The prisoner shook his head. Not until I have guarantees, real ones. But I'll give you this much. Look at who benefits most from the Moreau-Caruso families destroying each other. Look at who's been positioning themselves to fill the power vacuum. That's your answer. Victor stared at him for a long moment, then turned and walked away. Elena hurried to follow, her mind spinning. Do you believe him? She asked once they were out of earshot. I don't know. Victor's expression was troubled. But he's right about one thing. Someone does benefit from our families at war, and I need to figure out who before they make their next move. They returned to the command center where Victor pulled up files on every major family in the city, every operation, every business front. Elena watched him work, saw the brilliant strategic mind that had made him feared throughout the criminal underworld. Here, Victor said finally, pointing to a cluster of connections on his screen. The Marchetti family. They've been quiet lately. Too quiet. They operate mostly legitimate businesses now, but their criminal connections run deep. If they wanted to take over the city, eliminating us would be the first step. Would they work with the Volkovs? Normally, no. The Marchettis are old school, traditional. They'd see the Volkovs as crude foreigners. Victor frowned. Unless they're planning to use them and discard them once the job is done. Let the Volkovs do the dirty work of eliminating rivals, then step in to restore order and take control. It made a sick kind of sense. What do we do? Elena asked. We prove it, and then we end them. Victor's voice was granite. But carefully. If we move too soon, we tip our hand. If we wait too long, they execute their plan. Elena's phone buzzed, the mystery contact again. You're getting close. The Marchettis are part of it, but they're not the whole picture. The real threat is someone you'd never suspect, someone who has access to both families. Think about who's been in position to orchestrate all of this from the beginning. She showed the message to Victor. His face went pale. No, he said softly. It can't be. Who? Victor pulled up another file, this one marked with highest security clearance. A photograph appeared on screen. A man in his 60s, distinguished, respected. Someone Elena recognized from family gatherings, from the cathedral, from 100 different moments throughout her life. Thomas Chen. Her father's most trusted advisor, The man who'd helped negotiate the original wedding contract. The man who'd been whispering in Anton's ear for 20 years. He has access to everything, Victor said, his voice hollow. Moreau family's secrets, Caruso negotiations, the wedding plans, the safe house locations. If Chen is the mole, he could have orchestrated all of this. Elena's mind raced back through conversations, moments, small things that hadn't made sense at the time. Chen had been the one to suggest the cathedral for the wedding, had been the one to arrange the seating that would have put both families in optimal positions for an attack, had been the one to recommend the safe house that turned out to be compromised. We have to tell my father. We have to prove it first. Victor was already working, pulling up financial records, communication logs, travel histories. If we accuse Chen without evidence, he'll disappear. We get one shot at this. They worked through the night, piecing together the puzzle. Chen's business dealings showed connections to Marchetti front companies. His travel records showed trips to cities where Volkov's cells operated. His phone records, when Victor's hackers finally broke into them, revealed coded communications with both families. It was all circumstantial, but together it painted a damning picture. He's been planning this for years, Victor said as dawn light began filtering through the command center windows. Positioning himself, building connections, waiting for the right moment. The wedding was supposed to be that moment. Kill us both, create chaos, then step in with Marchetti backing to restore order. But you stopped the wedding. So they pivoted. Went after your father directly, tried to eliminate you to hurt both families. When that didn't work, they escalated to tonight's attack. Victor's expression was grim. They're getting desperate, which makes them dangerous. Elena looked at the evidence spread across the screens. What now? Now we set a trap. Victor turned to her, and there was something fierce in his eyes. We give them what they want. A meeting between you and your father, somewhere supposedly safe, somewhere Chen will insist on controlling. You want to use me as bait. I want to give them an opportunity to make their final move, and when they do, we'll be ready. Victor's voice softened. I won't lie to you, Elena. This will be dangerous. They'll be expecting a trap. We'll have countermeasures. People could die. You could die. I could die anyway. Elena thought about the past months, about being moved and manipulated and treated like a chess piece. At least this way, I'm choosing to be on the board. Victor studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he smiled. You're nothing like I expected. Good or bad? Definitely good. He stood, offered his hand. Partners? Elena looked at the hand extended toward her. The hand of the man who'd rejected her, humiliated her, turned her life upside down. The hand of the man who'd also saved her life, protected her father, and was now trusting her with a plan that could end this nightmare. She took his hand. Partners. The handshake felt like a promise, like the beginning of something neither of them had planned, but both were ready to see through to the end. I'll contact your father, Victor said. Suggest a meeting to discuss a unified response to the Volkovs. Chen will insist on being there. We'll choose the location carefully, somewhere we can control. And then? Then we end this, once and for all. Elena felt something shift inside her. The girl who'd stood at that altar in a white dress, powerless and resigned, was gone. In her place was a woman who'd survived humiliation and violence and betrayal, who'd learned to fight back, who'd discovered that she was stronger than anyone, including herself, had believed. The war wasn't over. But for the first time, Elena felt like she might actually survive it. And more than that, she might actually win. The plan came together over the next 48 hours with a precision that would have been beautiful if it weren't so dangerous. Victor made the call to Anton on a line they both knew was monitored. He kept his voice neutral, diplomatic, as he proposed the meeting. The Volkov situation requires a unified response. Our families can't afford to keep fighting separate battles. On the other end, Anton played his part perfectly. Skeptical at first, then gradually warming to the idea. Where did you have in mind? Neutral ground. The old warehouse district on the river, Sector 7. There's a building there, used to be a shipping office before the port relocated. Secure, private, easy to defend. Elena listened to the conversation on speaker, watching Victor's face. He was calm, controlled, giving nothing away, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his free hand kept flexing and relaxing. I'll need to bring my people, Anton said, including Chen. He's been handling our security arrangements. There it was, the opening they'd been waiting for. Of course, Victor agreed smoothly. Bring whoever you need to feel safe. I'll do the same. The meeting was set for 2 days out. That gave Chen and his allies time to prepare whatever ambush they had planned. It also gave Victor time to prepare his counter-ambush. After the call ended, Victor sat back in his chair, the exhaustion showing through. He sounded bad, your father. Worse than when you talked to him. The Volkovs hit him hard, Elena said quietly. He's holding on by his fingernails. Which makes this even more dangerous. If Chen and the Marchettis are planning to eliminate both of us during this meeting, your father won't have the strength to fight back if things go wrong. Victor's expression was grim. We need absolute precision. One mistake and we all die. Elena thought about that, about the reality of what they were walking into. You could call it off. Find another way to expose Chen. There is no other way. Not fast enough. Victor stood, moved to the window overlooking the estate grounds. Chen knows we're hunting for the mole. Every hour we delay gives him time to cover his tracks, disappear, or strike first. This meeting is our best chance to catch him in the act. And if we're wrong, if it's not Chen, then we've wasted valuable time and resources on the wrong target. Victor turned to face her. But we're not wrong. Every piece of evidence points to him. He has means, motive, and opportunity. He's positioned himself perfectly to betray both families. Elena joined him at the window. Outside, workers were repairing the damage from the Volkov attack. The breached gate was being reinforced with steel plating. New security cameras were being installed. Victor's estate was transforming into an even more formidable fortress. I'm scared, she admitted quietly. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. Victor glanced at her. But don't let it paralyze you. When we walk into that warehouse, you need to be ready for anything. Can you do that? Elena thought about everything she'd survived. The humiliation at the cathedral, the months of isolation, the attack on her convoy, the siege of Victor's estate. Each experience had stripped away another layer of the naive girl she'd been, revealing someone harder underneath. Someone who could stand in a command center and coordinate defensive operations. Someone who could look at evidence of betrayal and calculate responses instead of just reacting emotionally. I can do that, she said. Victor studied her face, and something shifted in his expression. You know, when I first saw you at those formal dinners, before the wedding was arranged, I thought you were just another sheltered crime princess. Pretty, obedient, utterly unprepared for the reality of our world. That's exactly what I was. No, Victor's voice was certain. That's what you showed people, what you'd been taught to show. But underneath? He shook his head. I'm starting to think you were always stronger than anyone realized. You just needed a reason to stop hiding it. The observation struck deeper than Elena expected. She'd spent her whole life performing the role of dutiful daughter, compliant and decorative. Even she had believed that's all she was. But the past months had shattered that illusion. She'd discovered capacities she hadn't known she possessed. For analysis, for strategic thinking, for standing firm when everything around her was collapsing. Thank you, she said, for seeing that. Thank you for proving it. Victor's smile was brief but genuine. Now, come on. We have a lot of work to do. The next 2 days were a blur of preparation. Victor brought Elena into the planning sessions, treating her as an equal voice rather than a protected asset. She learned about the warehouse they'd chosen, studied floor plans until she could navigate the building in her mind, understood sight lines and defensive positions and escape routes. Sophia worked with her on basic self-defense and weapon handling. I'm not trying to make you a soldier, Sophia explained as she showed Elena how to properly hold a handgun. But if things go wrong, you need to be able to protect yourself, even for just the few seconds it takes to get to safety. Elena's hands shook the first time she held the weapon. It was heavier than she'd expected, the metal cold against her palms. Sophia guided her through the basics: stance, grip, sight alignment, trigger control. They practiced for hours in Victor's private range, until Elena could at least hit a target at close range with reasonable consistency. You're a natural, Sophia said, watching Elena put 3 rounds in the center mass of a paper target. Good instincts. I'm terrified, Elena admitted. That's normal. The day you stop being scared is the day you get careless. Sophia ejected the magazine, checked the chamber. Fear is useful. It tells you when something matters. Just don't let it control you. Elena thought about that as she cleaned the gun under Sophia's guidance. Control versus being controlled. It was the fundamental question of her entire life. She'd been controlled for so long by her father's expectations, by social obligations, by the limitations other people imposed on her. Now she was learning to control her fear, her responses, her own destiny. It felt like waking up after a lifetime of sleepwalking. The evening before the meeting, Victor called her to his study. He looked like he hadn't slept, which was probably accurate. The past 48 hours had been nonstop planning, coordination, contingency development. "Sit," he said, pouring 2 glasses of whiskey. He handed one to Elena without asking if she wanted it. She took a sip, felt the burn, welcomed it. Last-minute briefing? Last-minute honesty. Victor sat across from her, the firelight casting shadows across his face. "Tomorrow, there's a very real chance one or both of us doesn't make it out of that warehouse alive. Before we walk into that situation, there are things I want you to know." Elena's heart rate kicked up. "I'm listening." "The wedding!" Victor stared into his glass. "When I stopped it, when I rejected you in front of everyone, it was the hardest thing I'd ever done. Not because of political considerations or strategic calculations, but because I actually wanted to marry you." The admission hung in the air between them. "What?" Elena's voice came out as a whisper. "Those 3 times we met before the ceremony. The dinners, the contract signing, even that awkward conversation in your father's study. Every time I saw something in you. Intelligence hiding behind obedience. Strength masquerading as compliance. You were fascinating, and I couldn't stop thinking about you." Victor's smile was self-deprecating. "Which terrified me, because in our world, caring about someone makes them a target, makes you vulnerable." Elena struggled to process this. "Then why agree to the marriage at all?" "Because I thought I could keep it purely strategic. Marry you, keep emotional distance, use the alliance to strengthen both families." He laughed bitterly. "I lasted about a week into the wedding planning before I realized I was lying to myself. I was falling for a woman I barely knew, and that made you, incredibly dangerous to my enemies. So when you found out about the plot, I had a choice. Risk both our lives by going through with it, or destroy your reputation to save you." Victor met her eyes. "I chose your life over your dignity. I'd make the same choice again, even knowing the cost." Elena felt something crack open inside her chest. All the anger she'd been carrying, all the humiliation and hurt, it didn't disappear. But it shifted, recontextualized by this new information. He hadn't rejected her because she was unworthy. He'd rejected her because she mattered too much. "You should have told me," she said. "Probably. But I didn't trust myself to sell the rejection convincingly if you knew the truth. I needed everyone to believe it, which meant I needed you to believe it too." Victor set down his glass. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. What I did was calculated and cruel, and you have every right to hate me for it. I just wanted you to know the truth before tomorrow." Elena stood, paced to the window, tried to organize her thoughts. 6 months ago, she'd been a different person. Someone who would have melted at this confession, would have immediately forgiven him, would have fallen into the romance of it all. But she'd learned too much since then, had grown too much. "I don't hate you," she said finally, turning to face him. "But I don't know if I can trust you either. You made a decision that affected my entire life without consulting me. You thought you were protecting me, but you took away my agency to choose. I know. If we survive tomorrow, if we somehow make it through this war and expose the conspirators and come out the other side." Elena paused, choosing her words carefully. "I need you to understand that I'm not the same person who stood at that altar. I won't be controlled or protected without my consent. I won't be someone's strategic asset or emotional vulnerability. If there's going to be anything between us, it has to be between equals. Real equals." Victor stood, crossed to where she stood. He didn't reach for her, didn't try to close the physical distance. "I understand, and for what it's worth, the woman you've become is even more extraordinary than the one I thought I was protecting. Flattery won't fix this." "I know, but it's still true." Victor's expression turned serious. "Tomorrow, I need you to promise me something." "What?" "If things go wrong, if the situation becomes untenable, you run. You don't try to help, don't try to fight. You get out and you survive." "No." "Elena." "No," she repeated, more firmly. "We're partners, remember? That means we face whatever comes together. I'm not running while you sacrifice yourself. That's not how this works." Victor looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her face must have convinced him it would be futile. "You're incredibly stubborn. I learned from the best." Elena managed a small smile. Now, is there anything else in your last-minute honesty session, or can I go prepare for tomorrow? One more thing. Victor reached into his desk, pulled out a small box. This was my mother's. She died when I was 15. My father kept it locked away, but I found it years ago. He opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, a single diamond on a platinum band. I'm not proposing, Victor said quickly, but I want you to wear this tomorrow. If something happens to me, this ring is worth enough to buy you a new life. New identity, new city, whatever you need to disappear and start over. Elena stared at the ring, her throat tight. Victor, please, let me do this one thing. Let me make sure you have options, no matter what happens. His voice was quiet, urgent. Take it. Elena took the box, felt the weight of it in her palm. The ring was beautiful, understated, exactly what she would have chosen for herself if anyone had asked. She slipped it onto her right hand, not the traditional finger, not making any statement except that she accepted his offer of insurance. Thank you, she said softly. Victor nodded, the relief visible on his face. Then, surprising both of them, he pulled her into a hug. It was brief, careful, the embrace of someone who wasn't sure they had the right, but couldn't help themselves. Elena allowed it, even returned it, feeling the solid reality of him against her. When they pulled apart, Victor cleared his throat. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Elena left the study, the ring heavy on her finger, her mind spinning with revelations and emotions she didn't have time to process. Instead, she channeled everything into final preparations. She reviewed the warehouse plans one more time, checked the weapons Sophia had given her, tried on the body armor Victor had insisted she wear under her clothes. She didn't sleep. How could she, knowing that tomorrow she'd be walking into a trap within a trap, gambling her life on the hope that their counterplanning was better than the enemy's primary plan? Her phone buzzed around 3 a.m. The mystery contact. Tomorrow, trust your instincts. Chen isn't working alone. Watch for the person you least suspect. And remember, sometimes the best way to win is to change the game entirely. Elena stared at the message, frustration mounting. The contact had been helpful, had provided accurate intelligence, but the cryptic warnings were wearing thin. She typed back, "Who are you? Why are you helping me?" The response came immediately. Someone who knows what it's like to be underestimated. Someone who sees potential others miss. Win tomorrow, Elena. Survive. Then maybe we'll meet properly. No further messages came, no matter how many times Elena checked. Dawn broke cold and gray. Elena dressed carefully. Dark jeans, boots, a fitted jacket that concealed the body armor. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. She'd lost weight over the past months, her face leaner, her eyes harder. The girl who'd worn that white wedding dress was gone completely. Good. That girl wouldn't have survived what was coming. Victor was waiting in the foyer, surrounded by his core team. Sophia, Marcus, who'd made it safely to the estate after holding off the Volkovs, and 6 other soldiers whose loyalty Victor trusted absolutely. They all wore tactical gear, weapons visible now. No more pretense. Ready? Victor asked Elena. She checked the gun holstered at her hip, felt the reassuring weight of it. Ready! The convoy departed at 9. 3 vehicles, heavily armored, moving through city streets with practiced coordination. Elena rode with Victor, Marcus driving, Sophia in the passenger seat. The other vehicles flanked them, creating a mobile fortress. The warehouse district was industrial desolation, abandoned buildings, rusted equipment, weeds pushing through cracked pavement. The perfect location for a meeting that needed to stay off official records, or for an ambush. Their target building loomed ahead, a 3-story structure of brick and corrugated metal. It looked abandoned, but Elena knew Victor's team had spent the previous night setting up their own security measures. Hidden cameras, defensive positions, escape routes. They'd turned the warehouse into a controlled environment, but Chen would know they'd do that. Would have planned for it. The vehicles stopped outside. Victor's team deployed first, weapons ready, scanning for threats. Nothing moved in the ruins around them. Too quiet, Elena thought. Too still. Your father's convoy is approaching, Sophia reported, listening to radio chatter. ETA 2 minutes. Victor touched Elena's arm. Remember the plan. We go in, we have the meeting, we wait for Chen to make his move. When he does, you get behind me and let my people handle it. And if your people can't handle it, then we improvise. Victor's smile was grim. Together. Anton's convoy arrived exactly on time, 3 vehicles matching Victor's configuration. Elena watched her father emerge from the lead car, flanked by his own security team. He looked terrible, gaunt, moving with the careful precision of someone in pain, but his eyes were sharp, alert, taking in everything. And behind him, stepping out of the second vehicle, was Thomas Chen. Elena felt her chest tighten. Chen looked exactly as he always had, distinguished, calm, the picture of a trusted advisor. He smiled when he saw her, the expression grandfatherly and warm. The performance was flawless. "Elena," Anton said, pulling her into a careful embrace. "You look well." "Better than you." She could feel his ribs through his jacket, could smell antiseptic and old blood. "Dad." "I'm fine." He pulled back, managed a smile. "Victor's been taking care of you?" "He has." Anton turned to Victor, and the 2 men regarded each other with the wary respect of predators forced into temporary alliance. "Caruso." "Moreau, thank you for coming. Did I have a choice? The Volkovs are trying to eliminate both our families. We work together or we die separately." Anton gestured toward the warehouse. "Shall we?" They entered the building as a group, security teams checking corners and sightlines. The interior was a vast open space, dusty sunlight filtering through grimy windows. Victor's people had set up a table in the center with chairs around it. Neutral ground, or as neutral as anything could be in this world. Chen positioned himself behind Anton, the trusted advisor maintaining his role perfectly. But Elena watched him carefully, saw the way his eyes tracked the room's layout, the positioning of Victor's soldiers, the exits and entrances. He was calculating, planning. "Gentlemen," Chen said smoothly, "perhaps we should begin with a security sweep. Ensure everyone's comfort before we discuss sensitive matters." "Already done," Victor said. "My team checked the building last night." "Of course. But given recent events, perhaps both teams should verify." Chen's smile was diplomatic. "Trust, but verify, as they say." It was a reasonable request. Too reasonable to refuse without raising suspicion. Victor nodded. "Fine. Sophia, coordinate with Chen's people. Do a joint sweep." As Sophia moved to comply, Elena felt something click in her mind. Chen was separating Victor's forces, creating opportunities for his own people to position themselves. This was the opening move. She touched Victor's arm subtly, their predetermined signal for danger. Victor's expression didn't change, but she saw the acknowledgement in his eyes. He'd caught it too. The joint security sweep took 10 minutes, teams spreading throughout the building, checking rooms and corridors. Elena watched Chen carefully. He remained near Anton, projecting calm confidence. But twice she caught him checking his phone, brief glances that could have been innocent but probably weren't. He was coordinating with someone. The Marchettis? The Volkovs? Both? The teams reported back. Building secure, no threats detected. Everyone relaxed fractionally, took their seats around the table. Anton and Victor at opposite ends, their respective advisors and security nearby. Elena positioned herself slightly behind Victor, able to see the whole room. "Let's talk strategy," Anton began. "The Volkovs hit my territory hard. I've lost significant resources, including key personnel. What I need—" He stopped abruptly as the building's power cut out. In the sudden darkness, Elena heard weapons being drawn, sharp commands, movement. Emergency lights kicked in after a few seconds, casting everything in dim red emergency lighting. "Backup power failure," one of Victor's techs reported. "Someone cut the lines." "Everybody stay calm," Victor ordered, but his hand was on his weapon now. "This could be—" The explosion ripped through the building's west wall. Elena was thrown sideways, hitting the ground hard despite the body armor. Her ears rang, dust and debris filling the air. She tried to orient herself, tried to find Victor through the chaos. Gunfire erupted, not from inside the building, from outside. Multiple positions, coordinated fire pouring through the breach in the wall. The Volkovs, Elena realized. Chen had called them in. "Ambush!" Sophia's voice cut through the chaos. "North and west positions! Return fire!" Victor's team responded instantly, taking cover, engaging the attackers. Anton's soldiers did the same, the two groups working together out of necessity. Elena scrambled behind an overturned table, drawing her own weapon with shaking hands. She saw her father across the room, Marcus protecting him, saw Victor coordinating his forces with hand signals, saw Chen. Chen was moving toward the back of the building, not toward cover, not toward the fight, toward an exit. He was running. "Victor!" Elena shouted over the gunfire. "Chen's escaping!" Victor turned, saw Chen's retreating figure, started to give chase, but more attackers poured through the breach, not Volkov's soldiers this time. These wore different tactical gear, moved with different patterns. The Marchettis had joined the fight. The warehouse became a war zone. Elena stayed behind her cover, trying to pick targets, trying to help. But the chaos was overwhelming. She saw one of Anton's men go down, then one of Victor's. The enemy had numerical advantage and better positioning. They were losing. "We need to fall back," Sophia shouted. "Get to the east exit." But the east exit exploded inward as another breach was created. More soldiers, another angle of attack. They were surrounded. Elena's mind raced. This was it, the final move. Chen had orchestrated a perfect trap. The meeting, the warehouse, the seemingly secure location, all of it designed to put both families in a kill box. And it was working. She saw Victor take a hit, armor stopping the bullet but the impact driving him to one knee. Saw Marcus go down protecting her father. Saw Sophia fighting 3 attackers at once, holding them but barely. They needed something to change the game. Something unexpected. Elena looked at Chen's retreating figure, now almost to the back exit. He thought he'd won. Thought he'd eliminated both families and would walk away clean to let the Marchettis and Volkovs fight over the scraps. He was wrong. Elena ran, not toward cover, not toward safety, toward Chen, weapon raised, all her fear transformed into focused determination. Someone shouted her name, Victor, maybe, or her father, but she didn't stop. Chen saw her coming, his expression shifting from triumph to surprise to calculation in rapid succession. His hand went to his own weapon, but Elena was faster. Sophia's training kicked in. She fired 3 times, center mass, exactly as she'd been taught. Chen went down. Elena reached him, kicked his weapon away, stood over him with her gun trained on his head. Blood bloomed across his chest, but he was still alive, still conscious. "Elena," he gasped, "you don't understand." "I understand perfectly. You betrayed both families, orchestrated all of this, tried to kill all of us." Her voice was steady despite her hammering heart. "It's over." "Not over?" Chen's smile was bloody. "Just beginning." He reached for something in his jacket. Elena almost shot him, but some instinct made her pause. Chen pulled out a phone, held it up so she could see the screen, a video feed, multiple angles, and on every screen she saw them, additional forces positioned around the warehouse, dozens of soldiers waiting for Chen's signal. "One text," Chen whispered, "and they storm the building. Nobody survives." Elena's blood ran cold. The ambush they'd been fighting was just the first wave. Chen had a second force standing by, insurance in case the first attack failed. "Why are you showing me this?" she demanded. "Because I'm offering a deal." Chen coughed, blood on his teeth. "Let me walk away. I call off the second wave. Everyone lives." Behind her, the gunfire was continuing. People were dying. Her father, Victor, Sophia, all of them fighting a battle they couldn't win if Chen unleashed his reserves. "You're bluffing," Elena said. "Am I?" Chen's finger hovered over the phone. "Test me. Everyone you care about dies. Your choice." Elena's mind raced through options, consequences, possibilities. She could shoot him, but if he was telling the truth about the dead man's switch, the second wave would attack anyway. She could let him go, but he'd disappear, regroup, try again later. Neither option was acceptable, unless she changed the game entirely. "Okay," Elena said, "you walk, but first you call off the current attack. All of it. Volkov's, Marchetti's, everyone. Right now." Chen studied her face, calculating whether she meant it. Whatever he saw there convinced him. He raised the phone, made a call. "Fall back," he ordered. "All units disengage and withdraw. Yes, I'm certain. Do it now." The gunfire began to taper off. The attackers started retreating, pulling back through the breaches they'd created. Within 2 minutes, the warehouse was silent, except for the groans of the wounded and the ringing in everyone's ears. Elena kept her weapon trained on Chen. "Now, the second wave. Let me up. Help me. Outside." "No! Cancel them from here." Chen smiled that bloody smile again. "Clever girl. But you Need me alive. And mobile. Insurance. He had a point. If Elena shot him now, she had no way to control the second wave. And she couldn't let him walk away free, but she could do something else. Victor, she called out. I need you. Now. Victor appeared through the settling dust, blood on his face, armor dented, but still standing. He saw Elena holding Chen at gunpoint, saw the phone, and his expression went cold. What's happening? Chen has a second wave of attackers standing by. He's offering to call them off if we let him go. Elena's voice was calm, clear. But I have a better idea. She looked down at Chen. You call off the second wave. Completely. Tell them the operation is canceled. Everyone's to stand down and disperse. You do that, and I won't shoot you right now. And then, what? Chen wheezed. You arrest me? I'll never see trial. Then what happens after is between you and whoever judges traitors. Elena's finger tightened on the trigger. But you're not walking out of here. That was never an option. Now make the call, or I put a bullet in your head and we take our chances with your second wave. Chen stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. He made another call, gave the cancellation orders, waited for confirmation. Elena watched the phone screen as the various forces dispersed, the threat dissolving. When it was done, she looked at Victor. He's all yours. Victor gestured to his soldiers. They moved in, secured Chen, disarmed him completely. The warehouse was still chaos, wounded being tended to, damage being assessed, security being reestablished. But the immediate threat was over. Anton appeared limping but alive. He saw Chen being restrained, saw Elena with her weapon, and understanding dawned across his face. You caught him, he said. We caught him, Elena corrected, looking at Victor. Together. The next hours were a blur of aftermath. Medical teams arriving to treat the wounded, police, the ones on various family payrolls, securing the scene, Chen being taken into custody, destination unknown but likely permanent. 8 people had died in the attack. 12 more were wounded. The cost of Chen's betrayal tallied in blood and lives. But both families had survived. The conspiracy had been exposed. The war, for now, was over. As the sun set over the ruined warehouse, Elena found herself sitting on the hood of one of the armored vehicles, exhaustion crashing over her in waves. Sophia appeared with bottles of water, handed one to Elena. You did good today, Sophia said. Really good. That move on Chen, most people would have frozen. I was terrified. But you acted anyway. That's what courage is. Sophia took a drink. Victor's been looking for you, by the way. He's finishing up with your father, but he wanted me to tell you to stick around. Elena nodded, too tired to do much else. When Victor finally appeared, he looked like he'd aged a decade. But he smiled when he saw her, and it reached his eyes this time. Your father wants to talk to you, he said. But first, I wanted to say thank you. You saved all of us today. Chen would have walked if you hadn't stopped him. We're partners, Elena said simply. That's what partners do. Victor sat beside her on the hood, close enough that their shoulders touched. About that. About what I said last night. About how I felt. Let's not, Elena interrupted gently. Not now. There's too much to process, too much that still needs to be resolved. Just let's survive the next few days first. Then we can figure out what comes after. Victor nodded slowly. Fair enough. But Elena, whatever comes after, whatever you decide about us or about your future, I want you to know that I see you, really see you, the strength, the courage, the brilliance. You're not a piece on anyone's board anymore. You're a player in your own right. Elena felt tears sting her eyes, but she blinked them back. Thank you for everything, but especially for that. They sat together in comfortable silence as the chaos continued around them. 2 people who'd survived impossible odds, who'd forged partnership from rejection and trust from betrayal. The war wasn't completely over. The Volkovs still existed. The Marchettis would need to be dealt with, and there would be consequences for Chen's conspiracy that would ripple through the underworld for years. But tonight, they'd won, and that was enough. Anton was waiting in one of the intact offices on the warehouse's second floor, Marcus standing guard outside the door. He looked worse under the harsh emergency lighting, pale, drawn, the pain medication clearly wearing off, but his eyes were sharp when Elena entered. Close the door, he said. Elena did, then turned to face her father. For a moment, neither of them spoke. 6 months ago, she would have rushed to apologize, to explain herself, to seek his approval. Now she just waited, calm and centered in a way that would have been impossible before the cathedral. You stopped Chen, Anton said finally. Saved both families. Victor told me what happened, how you ran at a man with a gun when everyone else was pinned down. Someone had to. That someone didn't have to be you. Anton's voice carried something Elena couldn't quite identify. You could have died. We all could have died. Did die 8 people, Dad. 8 people who followed us into that warehouse and didn't come back out. Elena moved closer. Chen betrayed you for years, orchestrated everything, the wedding attack, the Volkov alliance, probably a dozen other things we haven't discovered yet. And he did it right under your nose because you trusted him completely. The words were harsh, but Anton didn't flinch. I know. Do you? Because, from where I stand, this whole disaster happened because people in our world are so busy playing games with each other's lives that they never stop to ask if maybe there's a better way. Elena could feel the anger rising now, all the months of fear and frustration finding their voice. You arranged my marriage without asking what I wanted. Victor stopped it without explaining why. Chen manipulated both of you while people died, and I was just supposed to accept all of it because that's how things work in this world. Elena, no, let me finish. She was shaking now, but her voice stayed steady. I'm done being moved around like a chess piece, done having my life decided by men who think they know better, done pretending I'm weak or helpless or need constant protection. I'm not that person anymore, Dad. I can't be. Anton studied her face for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. I know. I saw it today, watching you handle Chen. You've become someone I barely recognize. Is that a problem? It's a revelation. Anton shifted in his chair, wincing at the movement. When you were born, I made a promise to protect you from the worst of this world, to give you a life that was softer, safer than what I'd known. I thought arranging your marriage to Victor was fulfilling that promise, giving you security, stability, power. You were giving me a cage, yes. The admission seemed to cost him, but you broke out of it anyway, became stronger than I ever imagined, and now I'm realizing that maybe the best thing I can do for you is stop trying to protect you and start trusting you to protect yourself. Elena felt tears threaten but refused to let them fall. What does that mean? It means choices. Real ones. Anton reached into his jacket, pulled out an envelope. I've been working on this since the Volkov attack. It's a trust fund, completely separate from family assets. Enough money to disappear, start over anywhere in the world, live comfortably without ever having to answer to this life again. He held out the envelope. Elena stared at it, her heart pounding. You're letting me go? I'm giving you the option. Anton's voice was rough with emotion. If you want to walk away from all of this, from me, from the family business, from the violence and the politics and the constant danger, you can. Take the money, change your name, build whatever life you want. I won't stop you. Won't try to find you. You'll be free. Elena took the envelope with shaking hands. Inside were account numbers, passwords, documentation for a new identity. Her father had thought of everything. Planned for her escape with the same meticulous attention he brought to every strategic decision. And if I stay? She asked quietly. Then you stay as yourself, not as my daughter who needs protection, but as a partner in rebuilding what Chen destroyed. Someone with her own voice, her own power, her own decisions. Anton met her eyes. I won't lie. It's a harder path. More dangerous. The Volkovs still exist, the Marchettis will need to be dealt with, and there are always new threats rising. But if you choose it, it'll be your choice. Elena looked at the envelope in her hands. Freedom. A new life. Everything she'd dreamed about during those months of isolation. It was right here, being offered freely. All she had to do was take it. She thought about who she'd been 6 months ago. The girl who'd have grabbed this opportunity without hesitation, desperate to escape the world she'd been born into. But that girl was gone. The woman who'd replaced her had learned things about herself, about her capacity for courage, for strategy, for standing firm when everything was falling apart. She'd learned she was stronger than her circumstances. I need to think about it, Elena said finally. Anton nodded. Take whatever time you need. The offer doesn't expire. He paused. But Elena, whichever you choose, I'm proud of you, prouder than I've ever been of anyone in my life. The tears came then, unexpected and unstoppable. Elena let them fall. Let herself be human for just a moment. Anton stood, pulled her into a careful embrace, and for the first time in months, she felt like his daughter instead of his chess piece. When they pulled apart, Marcus knocked on the door. "Sir, the council is assembling. They want to discuss Chen's interrogation results and next steps." The council, the ruling body of families that governed the underworld's major decisions. Elena had never been allowed to attend their meetings before. Daughters didn't get seats at that table. "I'll be there shortly," Anton said. Then to Elena's surprise, "Tell them Elena will be joining us." Marcus's eyebrows rose, but he simply nodded. "Yes, sir." After he left, Anton looked at Elena. "You don't have to come. This isn't me forcing you into family business. But if you want to see how these decisions get made, if you want to understand the world you're choosing to stay in or leave behind, this is your chance." Elena thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. "I'll come." The council meeting took place in a secure location across the city, a private club that catered to the kind of clientele who valued discretion above all else. Elena rode there with Victor, both of them cleaned up but still showing signs of the day's violence. Victor had a butterfly bandage on his temple. Elena had bruises blooming across her ribs despite the body armor. "You don't have to do this," Victor said as they approached the club. "Council meetings can be brutal. A lot of ego, a lot of posturing, a lot of very dangerous people in one room." "Sounds like every family dinner I've ever attended," Elena said dryly. Victor laughed, the sound surprising both of them. "Fair point. Just stay close to me. Let me handle the political maneuvering. I'm not planning to make speeches. I just want to observe." The club's interior was all mahogany and leather, oil paintings and crystal chandeliers. Old money aesthetics hiding new money crimes. They were escorted to a private room where the council had assembled, heads of the 7 major families that controlled the city's underworld. Elena recognized most of them. Vincent Marchetti, whose family's involvement in the conspiracy hadn't been proven yet, but was heavily suspected. The Zhao family matriarch, ancient and sharp-eyed. Michael Ferretti, who controlled the gambling operations. Others whose names carried weight in the shadows. And at the head of the table, occupying the chairman's seat with casual authority, was her father. Anton gestured to an empty chair beside him. Elena took it, aware of every eye in the room tracking her movement. She'd been in the same building as these people before, at parties and gatherings, but never at the table itself, never as a participant. "Gentlemen and Mrs. Zhao," Anton began, "thank you for convening on short notice. We have urgent matters to discuss regarding Thomas Chen's betrayal and its implications for all our families." The next hour was a masterclass in underworld politics. Evidence was presented, financial records, communication logs, testimony from captured Volkov soldiers. The conspiracy's scope was staggering. Chen had been planning his takeover for 5 years, carefully positioning pieces, cultivating allies, waiting for the perfect moment. The wedding was supposed to be that moment. Eliminate both heirs, trigger a war between the 2 most powerful families. Let the Volkovs and Marchettis divide the spoils while Chen orchestrated everything from behind the scenes. "The question," Mrs. Zhao said in her precise, accented English, "is what to do about those who aided him. The Marchetti family's involvement cannot be ignored." All eyes turned to Vincent Marchetti. He met their gazes without flinching. "My family had no knowledge of Chen's conspiracy. If individual members acted without authority, they'll be dealt with according to our internal justice." "Internal justice isn't enough," Michael Ferretti said. "This was an attack on the entire council structure. We need accountability." The argument escalated, voices rising, old grudges surfacing. Elena watched it unfold, saw the fracture lines in the alliance. These families might cooperate when necessary, but trust was scarce. Chen had exploited those fractures expertly. "Enough!" Victor's voice cut through the debate. "Fighting amongst ourselves is exactly what Chen wanted. We survived his conspiracy because the Moreau and Caruso families worked together. That cooperation needs to continue if we're going to stabilize the city." "Easy for you to say," Marchetti shot back. "Your family came out of this stronger. Mine is under suspicion." "Your family is under suspicion because your nephew was commanding Marchetti soldiers at the warehouse," Victor said flatly. "We have him in custody. He's already confirmed your family's involvement." The room went silent. Marchetti's face drained of color. I didn't authorize. Whether you authorized it or not, it happened under your watch. Your family benefited from the conspiracy, or was supposed to." Victor leaned forward. "The council needs to decide consequences. But those consequences need to be proportional and focused on stability, not revenge. Elena watched her father nod fractionally. They'd discussed this beforehand, she realized. Victor and Anton had coordinated their approach to the council, presenting a united front. I propose the following, Anton said. The Marchetti family makes full restitution to both the Moreau and Caruso families for damages incurred. They also cede operational control of the Port District to joint Moreau-Caruso oversight for a period of 5 years. In exchange, we don't pursue further action against Marchetti assets or personnel. It was a brilliant solution, harsh enough to be punishment, practical enough to avoid open warfare, structured to strengthen the Moreau-Caruso alliance while bringing the Marchettis to heel. Marchetti looked like he'd swallowed glass, but he nodded. Agreed. The Volkovs are a separate matter, Mrs. Zhao said. They're foreign actors who attacked multiple families. This cannot stand. It won't, Victor said. We've been tracking their remaining cells. Within a week, the Volkovs will be eliminated or expelled from the city entirely. They made the mistake of thinking we were weak. They'll learn otherwise. The council discussed details, logistics, enforcement. Elena listened to it all, absorbing the mechanics of how power actually worked at this level. It wasn't the dramatic confrontation she'd imagined. It was negotiation, compromise, strategic calculation. Violence was always an option, but these people had learned that sometimes the threat of violence was more useful than the reality. Finally, Anton turned to her. Elena has something to share regarding Chen's capture. Every eye in the room fixed on her. Elena felt her heart rate spike, but she kept her expression neutral. I was the one who stopped Chen from escaping. He had a second wave of attackers positioned as insurance, ready to eliminate everyone if his primary assault failed. I negotiated his surrender in exchange for calling off that attack. You negotiated? Ferretti's tone suggested he found this hard to believe. I held a gun on a wounded traitor and gave him a choice between dying immediately or living long enough to be properly interrogated. Elena's voice was calm. He chose interrogation. His second wave dispersed. We all survived. It seemed like a reasonable exchange. Mrs. Zhao's laugh was unexpected, a sharp bark of amusement. I like her. She has spine. The question, Marchetti said, is what role she plays going forward. Is she here as Anton's daughter or as something else? Elena felt the weight of the moment. This was it, the choice her father had offered her, now being made public. She could defer to Anton, let him speak for her, maintain the fiction that she was just observing, or she could claim her own voice. I'm here as myself, Elena said clearly. I'm not representing anyone else's interests. I'm learning how this world works so I can make informed decisions about my own future. Whether that future includes the family business or not is something I'm still deciding. The honesty seemed to surprise them. Council members exchanged glances, recalculating. Fair enough, Mrs. Zhao said finally. But know this, young Moreau. Now that you've sat at this table, now that you've been part of these discussions, you can't simply walk away pretending ignorance. The knowledge you carry makes you either an asset or a liability. Choose wisely which you'll be. It was a warning wrapped in advice. Elena nodded her understanding. The meeting concluded shortly after. Decisions made, alliances reinforced, consequences established. As people filed out, Victor caught Elena's eye, gestured toward a private corner. You did well, he said when they had relative privacy. Mrs. Zhao doesn't give compliments lightly. And your answer about your future, that was smart. Non-committal, but honest. I meant it. I genuinely don't know yet what I'm going to do. Elena looked at him. What about you? What do you want? Victor was quiet for a moment. I want you safe. I want the city stable. I want to build something better than what my father left me. An empire that doesn't require quite so much blood to maintain. That's very noble and very vague. Okay, you want specific? Victor stepped closer, his voice dropping. I want you to choose to stay. Not because you have to. Not because you're trapped. But because you genuinely want to be here. Want to help rebuild what Chen destroyed. Want to... He paused. Want to see if this thing between us could actually work. Elena's breath caught. Victor, I know. Too soon, too complicated, too many variables. He managed a rueful smile. But you asked what I wanted, that's my answer. Take whatever time you need to figure out yours. Before Elena could respond, Sophia appeared. Sorry to interrupt, but we've got movement. The Volkovs are mobilizing their remaining forces. Looks like they're planning one last strike. Victor's expression hardened instantly. Where? Multiple targets. They're going for a scorched earth strategy. If they can't have the city, they'll try to burn it down on their way out. Sophia's jaw was tight. We have maybe 2 hours before they hit. The drive back to Victor's estate was tense and silent. Elena's mind raced through scenarios, possibilities, risks. The Volkovs were desperate, which made them unpredictable. Desperate people did desperate things. Back at the estate, Victor's war room was chaos. Maps covered with markers indicating Volkov positions and likely targets. Teams being deployed, weapons distributed, alliances being activated. This was it, the final confrontation. They're targeting infrastructure, Victor explained, pointing to the maps. Power stations, water treatment, communication hubs. They want to cripple the city, create chaos that'll take years to recover from. Can you stop them? Elena asked. We can stop most of them, but not all. Victor's expression was grim. We don't have enough people to cover every possible target. We're going to have to prioritize, which means some attacks will succeed. Unless we can cut off the command structure. Elena studied the maps, an idea forming. The Volkovs are coordinated, which means they have a central command. Take that out, and the individual cells lose direction. We don't know where their command is located. But I might know someone who does. Elena pulled out her phone, the mysterious contact who'd been helping her. She typed quickly. The Volkovs are planning final attacks. Multiple targets. Need their command location. Can you help? The response came within seconds. Already tracking them, sending coordinates now. But Elena, this is the endgame. Whatever you decide about your future, make sure you survive to have that future. The coordinates appeared. An abandoned industrial complex on the river, far from the main fighting. It made sense. Isolated, defensible, with clear sight lines and multiple escape routes. Elena showed Victor. This is it, their command center. How do you know? How do you know this contact is even real and not leading us into another trap? Victor's frustration was evident. Because they've been right about everything so far. The safe house, the attack on your estate, Chen's betrayal, all of it. Elena met his eyes. We don't have time to verify every source. Sometimes you have to trust your instincts. Victor stared at her for a moment, then nodded. Okay, we hit the command center. Sophia, get teams ready. Fast assault, maximum force. We end this tonight. The next hour was preparation. Elena suited up in body armor again, checked her weapon, tried to ignore the fear coiling in her stomach. This was different from the warehouse. This was an offensive strike against a defended position. People were going to die. She might be one of them. Victor found her in the armory, loading magazines with methodical precision. You don't have to come. Actually, I'd prefer if you didn't. We're partners, remember? Partners don't require each other to walk into suicide missions. Elena looked up at him. Is that what this is? A suicide mission? It's a high-risk assault on a fortified position held by people who have nothing left to lose. So yeah, suicide mission is pretty accurate. Victor's expression was conflicted. I can't order you to stay behind, but I'm asking, please. Elena thought about it. Thought about the envelope in her jacket pocket, the trust fund that could buy her escape. Thought about the life she could have. Quiet, safe, far from all this violence. Thought about the person she'd been 6 months ago, who would have jumped at that chance. But she also thought about who she'd become. The woman who'd stood in a command center coordinating defense, who'd stopped Chen when everyone else was pinned down, who'd earned Mrs. Zhao's respect and sat at the council table. That woman didn't run from hard choices. I'm coming, she said firmly. Not because I have to, because I choose to. Because these are my people too now, my city, my fight. And because I trust you to keep me as safe as possible while we do this impossible thing. Victor looked like he wanted to argue more, but something in her expression stopped him. Stay close to me. Follow my orders without question. And if I tell you to run, you run. Agreed? Agreed. The assault team moved out at midnight. 3 vehicles, 20 of Victor's best soldiers, plus Sophia and Marcus. Elena rode with Victor, the city passing by in a blur of lights and shadows. The industrial complex loomed ahead, dark against the darker sky. Remember the plan, Victor said over the radio. Team 1 takes the main entrance, Team 2 circles to the back. Team 3 secures the perimeter. Sophia, you're with me on the command center itself. We go in fast, hit hard, take out their leadership before they can coordinate their attacks. Acknowledgements came back. Everyone knew their role. Everyone understood the stakes. The vehicles stopped a quarter-mile from the complex. Teams deployed silently, moving through the darkness with practiced efficiency. Elena stayed close to Victor, her heart hammering but her hands steady. They approached the main building. It looked abandoned, but thermal imaging showed heat signatures inside. At least 15 people, possibly more. Victor gave the signal. Team 1 breached the main entrance with controlled explosives. The night erupted into chaos. Elena followed Victor through the breach, into corridors lit by emergency lights and muzzle flashes. Gunfire echoed off concrete walls. Someone screamed. She saw one of the Volkov soldiers go down, then one of Victor's team. They pushed deeper into the complex. The Volkovs fought hard, knowing this was their last stand. But Victor's team was better trained, better equipped, and motivated by months of being pushed to the defensive. They cleared room after room with brutal efficiency. "Command center ahead," Sophia called out. "Reinforced door, at least 6 hostiles inside." Victor assessed the situation. "Breach charges. We go in hard and fast. Elena, stay behind me and Sophia. When the shooting starts, get behind cover and stay there." Elena nodded, adrenaline singing through her veins. The charges were set. 3 seconds. 2. 1. The door exploded inward. Victor and Sophia went through first, weapons raised. Elena followed, saw the command center spread before them. Monitors showing the various attack teams, weapons caches, maps of the city. And standing in the center of it all was a man Elena had never seen before. Late 50s, graying hair, expensive suit despite the tactical situation. He held a phone in one hand, gun in the other. "Victor Caruso," the man said in heavily accented English. "Finally, we meet face to face. I am Dmitry Volkov. You've been very problematic for my organization." "You attacked my city," Victor replied, weapon trained on Dmitry's chest. "What did you expect?" "I expected less resistance, more fear." Dmitry's smile was cold. "Chen promised us an easy victory, promised that the families would crumble if we struck hard enough. He was wrong about that. Chen promised you a lot of things. He's not in a position to deliver anymore." "So I've heard." Dmitry glanced at Elena. "And this must be the famous Elena Moreau, the rejected bride who became a warrior. Very dramatic." "Drop the weapon," Sophia ordered. "Order your teams to stand down. It's over." "Is it?" Dmitry's finger moved on the phone. "I have one button to press, one message to send, and all those attacks we've planned, they happen simultaneously. Power grid goes down. Water treatment explodes. Communication systems crash. Chaos spreads across the city. Thousands die in the resulting confusion. Then you die 2 seconds later," Victor said flatly. "Press that button and I put a bullet in your head. A worthy trade. My life for the destruction of everything you've built." Dmitry's expression was eerily calm. "Unless you want to negotiate." "What could you possibly offer?" "Safe passage, for me and my remaining people. We leave the city, never return, and I don't press this button." Dmitry held up the phone. "A simple exchange. Your city for my life." Victor didn't even hesitate. "No." Dmitry's eyebrows rose. "You would sacrifice thousands of innocent lives rather than let me walk away." "I'm calling your bluff. You press that button, your teams get the order to attack, and every single one of them gets killed or captured within the hour. We've been tracking them all night. We know where they are. The only question is whether they go down fighting or surrender peacefully. You can't cover all the targets." "We don't need to cover all of them. We just need to stop enough to prove you failed. And then your organization is finished. Dead leadership, failed operation, no leverage, no power. You press that button and you die for nothing." The standoff stretched. Elena could see Dmitry calculating, trying to find an angle, but Victor had backed him into a corner with no escape. Finally, Dmitry laughed. "You know, Chen said you were the smartest man he'd ever met. I thought he was exaggerating. Clearly not. Put down the phone, put down the gun. Order your teams to stand down. You do that, you live. You might even get to leave the city eventually, though not tonight. And if I refuse? Then we find out if you're actually willing to die for this vendetta, or if you're just another criminal who talks tough but runs when cornered." Elena watched Dmitry's face, saw the moment he made his decision. He wasn't a fanatic, wasn't someone who believed in causes worth dying for. He was a businessman who'd made a bad investment and was cutting his losses. The phone clattered to the ground. The gun followed. "I surrender," Dmitry said. "Call off your attack. I'll order my people to stand down. Victor gestured to Sophia. She moved forward, secured Dmitri, took his phone. Within minutes, the stand-down orders were being transmitted. Across the city, Volkov's cells were laying down their weapons, surrendering to the teams that had been tracking them. It was over. The Volkov threat was finished. The aftermath took days to fully process. Dmitri and his remaining soldiers were handed over to federal authorities. The legitimate ones, not the ones on family payrolls. They'd face trial for terrorism, racketeering, attempted mass murder. They'd never see freedom again. The Marchetti family made their restitution payments, ceded territory as agreed. Vincent Marchetti's nephew disappeared, and it was understood that some forms of justice didn't require trials. Chen survived his interrogation long enough to provide detailed information about his conspiracy. Then he didn't survive. No one asked questions about what happened. No one particularly cared. The city slowly returned to normal, or as normal as it ever got. Elena spent a week thinking about her choices, about her future, about the envelope still sitting in her jacket pocket. She finally made her decision on a cool evening in early December. She found Victor in his study, paperwork spread across his desk, looking exhausted but satisfied. "We need to talk," she said. Victor looked up, and she saw the flash of fear in his eyes. He thought she was leaving, thought she'd chosen escape over this complicated, dangerous life. Elena sat across from him, pulled out the envelope. "My father gave me this. It's enough money to disappear, start over, build a life completely separate from all of this." "I know. He told me." Victor's voice was carefully neutral. "I've been thinking about it, about what I want, who I want to be." Elena met his eyes. "And I realized something. 6 months ago, I would have taken this offer immediately, run as far and fast as I could. But now? Now I understand that running doesn't actually solve anything. The person I was would have felt trapped anywhere, because the trap was never the city or the family or the underworld. It was the belief that I didn't have choices, didn't have power, didn't have agency over my own life." Elena set the envelope on the desk. "I'm not taking the money. I'm staying. Not because I have to, but because I choose to. Because I've discovered I'm good at this. The strategy, the negotiation, the crisis management. Because I can make a difference here." Victor's expression shifted, hope warring with caution. "You're sure? This life? It's not easy. It's not safe. There will always be new threats, new challenges." "I know, but there would be threats and challenges anywhere. At least here, I'm facing them on my own terms." Elena leaned forward. "I have conditions, though. I'm not just Anton's daughter anymore. I want my own position, my own authority. I want to build something legitimate, businesses, foundations, operations that actually help people instead of just extracting from them. You want to reform the underworld from within. I want to prove that power doesn't have to corrupt, that we can be strong without being cruel, that there's a better way to operate than the old models of fear and violence." Elena's voice was passionate now. "Maybe I'm naive, maybe it's impossible, but I want to try." Victor was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, and it transformed his entire face. "You know what? I think you might actually pull it off, and I want to help. Even if it means changing how the Caruso family operates? Especially then. I've been looking for a reason to build something better than what my father left me. Something I could be proud of instead of just powerful through. You could be that reason." Elena felt warmth bloom in her chest. "Is this you being strategic or being sentimental? Can't it be both?" Victor stood, moved around the desk. "I told you before that I wanted to marry you, that I'd stop the wedding not because I didn't want you, but because I cared too much to risk you." "I remember." "That's still true. But I also understand what you said, that you're not the same person anymore, that any relationship between us needs to be between equals." Victor held out his hand. "So I'm not proposing marriage. I'm proposing partnership. Real partnership. Build this better future together. See if we can actually change things." Elena looked at his hand. 6 months ago, at the cathedral, she'd stood before this man as someone who had no choices, no power, no voice. Now she was being offered a partnership based on respect, equality, shared purpose. She took his hand. "Partners." "Partners," Victor agreed. And then, because some things transcended strategy and politics, because some moments were just about two people who'd survived impossible odds together, he pulled her close and kissed her. Elena let herself melt into it, let herself feel the connection that had been building through crisis and trust and shared danger. When they pulled apart, both breathless, she laughed. "What?" Victor asked. "I'm just thinking about how this started. You rejecting me at the altar in front of 200 people, and now here we are. Biggest mistake I've ever made, stopping that wedding." "No." Elena touched his face. "It was exactly the right call. If we'd married then, I would have been that scared, powerless girl. Now I'm someone who can actually stand beside you, someone who earned this partnership instead of having it arranged." "You're right." Victor captured her hand, pressed a kiss to her palm. "Though I reserve the right to eventually propose properly, when we've built this better world we're talking about, when you're ready. I'll hold you to that." The months that followed were transformation. Elena established her own organization, legitimate on the surface, but with connections deep into the underworld. She focused on harm reduction, on creating opportunities for people trying to escape the cycle of crime, on using the family resources to actually build instead of just extract. Some of the old guard resented her approach, called her soft, naive, dangerous to the established order. But Anton backed her completely, as did Victor. And slowly, grudgingly, results started to speak for themselves. Crime rates in Moreau-controlled territories dropped, not because of increased violence, but because people had better options. Businesses flourished with Elena's investment and protection. The communities started to thrive. Other families watched. Some dismissed it as an anomaly. But Mrs. Zhao contacted Elena personally, asked to discuss implementing similar programs in her territories. Then the Ferrettis approached. Change, it turned out, was contagious. The Moreau and Caruso alliance solidified into something unprecedented, a genuine partnership based on shared values and mutual respect rather than just strategic necessity. Elena and Victor built businesses together, foundations together, a vision for the city together, and somewhere along the way, partnership became something more. It was Victor who finally proposed a year after the warehouse confrontation. Not at a cathedral, not in front of 200 people. Just the two of them on the estate grounds where Elena had once hidden in a gazebo, dreaming of escape. "I'm not offering you an arranged marriage," he said, holding out a ring, not his mother's ring, which Elena still wore on her right hand, but a new one they'd chosen together. "I'm offering you a choice. Choose me. Choose us. Choose this life we're building." Elena looked at him, this complicated man who'd hurt her and saved her, who'd rejected her to protect her, who'd become her truest partner and closest ally. She thought about the girl who'd stood at that altar, powerless and afraid. She thought about the woman she'd become, strong and certain and finally free. "Yes," she said simply. They married 6 months later. Small ceremony, close friends, and family only. No cathedral, no political spectacle, no public performance. Just two people choosing each other, freely and completely. Anton walked her down the aisle, pride evident in every step. Sophia stood as her maid of honor. The mysterious contact sent flowers with a note that just read, "Congratulations, you chose wisely. A friend." Elena never did find out who'd been helping her, but she suspected it was someone who'd once been in a similar situation, who'd seen her potential when everyone else saw a chess piece, who'd given her just enough information to save herself. Whoever they were, Elena was grateful. The years that followed brought challenges. They always did in that world. New threats emerged. Old enemies resurfaced. The work of building something better was constant and often frustrating. But Elena faced it all with the certainty of someone who'd chosen her path, rather than having it chosen for her. She built her foundation into a powerful force for change. She earned her seat on the council through merit rather than family name. She proved again and again that strength and compassion weren't mutually exclusive, and Victor stood beside her through all of it, true partner in every sense. They fought sometimes, disagreed often, but always came back to the fundamental trust they'd forged in crisis. They built an empire together, not the old kind based on fear, but something new, something better. 5 years after that second wedding, Elena stood in the office she'd built, looking out over the city. Her city now, in ways that had nothing to do with family legacy and everything to do with the choices she'd made, the battles she'd won, the future she'd fought for. Her phone buzzed. Victor, texting from across town where he was handling some business negotiation. "How did the foundation meeting go?" "Good. We're expanding into 3 new neighborhoods. The youth programs are showing real results." "Proud of you." "Always." Elena smiled, typed back a heart emoji, then returned to her work. There were reports to review, decisions to make, people counting on her to show up and lead. She was ready for all of it. The girl who'd stood at that cathedral in a white dress, being rejected by a man she barely knew, would never have imagined this future. Would never have believed she could transform humiliation into power, betrayal into partnership, fear into purpose. But that girl was gone. In her place stood Elena Caruso, not defined by her marriage or her family name, but by the choices she'd made and the life she'd built. She was powerful not because someone had given her power, but because she'd claimed it herself. She was loved not because she was useful, but because she was valued. She was free not because she'd escaped, but because she'd refused to be caged. And when she looked back at that moment in the cathedral, at Victor's cold rejection that had shattered her world, she understood something fundamental. Sometimes the worst thing that ever happens to you is actually the best thing. Sometimes being broken down is the only way to become who you were always meant to be. Sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of a better one. Elena turned from the window, back to her work, back to the life she'd chosen and the future she was building. And she had never been more certain that she was exactly where she belonged.